Chapter 171. Emperor Jing was supported by several guards to another room to rest. Li Xian secretly gave a thumbs up to Li Yi and followed Prince Ning. What happened today made Li Yi secretly vigilant in his heart. In the future he still had to stay away from these emperors and princes. If the other party suddenly fainted or died suddenly like this, wouldn't he be implicated? The efficiency of the imperial physicians was very slow. Li Yi sat here and drank a cup of tea before the two officials of the Imperial Physician Bureau came late. Of course, the price of being late was being scolded by the effeminate old man outside the door like a grandson. However, these two guys deserved it. As the emperor's personal imperial physicians, why did they come here? If there was any sudden situation and they didn't treat the emperor in time, the two of them could only use the rock-paper-scissors game to decide who should be the first to be beheaded. What should be done was done. Li Yi wanted to leave, but Prince Ning had just said that he should wait here and wait for His Majesty's summons. The idea of going back to sleep early could only be put aside for the time being. He was also very unlucky to meet the emperor while strolling in the garden. He began to think if he had said anything disrespectful just now. It seemed that he did, but it seemed that he didn't. Only ghosts would remember so much. In this way, that Constable Emmingsu was really a princess? She didn't want to be a princess, but she came to be a constable. Was it not enough for her to be alone? She had to drag him down with her. She was really crazy. The two officials of the Imperial Physician Bureau were scolded. They lowered their heads and went into the room to diagnose the emperor to make sure that there was nothing wrong with the emperor's body. After they left, they continued to be scolded. In the room where Li Yi was, 2 rows of armored guards with weapons stood neatly. He had just picked up the second cup of tea, but before he had time to take a sip, a guard came out of the room and bowed. "Lord Li, His Majesty summons you." Standing up from his seat under the guidance of the guard, he walked to the door of another room. From afar he saw Ning Wang and Li Emmingsu sitting on the two sides. The one he had seen in the garden, the one he thought was a high official, was actually the emperor's man lying on the bed. There were 2 other women in the room. One was Ning Wang Fei, the other he didn't know. "She County Lieutenant greets Your Majesty." In front of the emperor, Li Yi could only kneel and pay his respects. Fortunately, the floor of the room was covered with a thick blanket, so he wouldn't feel uncomfortable kneeling on it. "You have done a meritorious deed in saving the emperor, so there is no need to be overly courteous. Come have a seat." Emperor Jing's voice was still a little weak. Not long after he finished speaking, 2 guards brought a chair over. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Li thanked. Just as he sat down, Ning Wang took a step forward and looked at the woman Li Yi didn't know. He said, "This is the Empress. County Lieutenant Li, you still need to pay your respects." Li Yi felt strange. The Emperor and Empress of the Jing Kingdom didn't stay in the palace, but ran around outside. Kneeling once was not enough, so he had to stand up and pay his respects again. The Empress sat at the front and looked at him. There was satisfaction in her phoenix eyes. Just now, when His Majesty had summoned him, she and Ning Wang Fei had left. When they learned that His Majesty had fainted, they had jumped in fright. Knowing that it was this young man who saved the emperor, she naturally saw him in a different light. "Li Yi of Anxi County, you have done a meritorious deed in saving the emperor. How do you want me to reward you?" Hearing this, Li Yi was happy. Should he take this opportunity to ask the emperor to take back his order and not let him be a county lieutenant? However, the position of county lieutenant had just been conferred, and he hadn't had time to take it yet. If he asked to resign, wouldn't it be like letting the emperor slap his own face? As the saying goes, a ruler doesn't joke. The ancient emperor seemed to take this matter very seriously. If he made such a request, would it anger him? Forget it, he wouldn't take this risk. He put his hands honestly on his thighs and said seriously, "His Majesty is fine. It is already the greatest reward from heaven to me. I dare not ask for credit again." He was not that stupid. The emperor asked this out of politeness. He should reward as he should. No matter how much he said, it was better to flatter him. When Li Xian heard this, he almost couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of air. No matter how he listened, it didn't sound like something he should say. "I have always been clear about rewards and punishments. Those who have meritorious deeds will be rewarded, and those who have sinned will be punished." Emperor Jing was very happy with his words. There was a smile on his pale face and he said, "Li Yi, come forward and receive your reward." Li Yi couldn't help but look bitter. Well, he just sat down for a while and he had to kneel again. Li Yi of Anxi County, for saving the emperor, will be rewarded with 100 bolts of silk, 100 acres of fertile land and 10,000 gold. There was no official title, but there were a lot of material rewards. 100 bolts of silk and 100 acres of fertile land. Li Yi didn't feel much about it, but the 10,000 gold at the end really scared him. According to the market price, 10,000 gold could be exchanged for 100,000 silver, and 1 silver could be exchanged for 1,000 copper coins. How much was 100,000 times 1,000? It was a lot. With 10,000 taels of gold, there was no need for her to sell ruidu and spirits. She could even stop selling perfume and fragrant soap. She could go back home and guard the mountain of gold and that 100 mu of fertile land. She and Rui could live a carefree and happy life as landlords and housewives. In an instant, Li Yi's good impression of the emperor rose. Such a generous emperor must be a good emperor. I thank your majesty for your grace. This time he bowed with sincerity. Li Yi, can you cure father's illness? When he returned to his seat again, a clear voice came. When he turned his head, he found that Emingzu was looking at him with a burning gaze. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone looked at Li Yi. What illness does his majesty suffer from? Li Yi still didn't know what illness the emperor had. He fainted for no reason, so it shouldn't be a simple illness. Asthma. The 2 imperial physicians were called in. After listening to their description, Li Yi had a general idea in his heart. The asthma they were talking about should be asthma. Asthma wasn't a good illness. Even in modern times there didn't seem to be a cure for it. As Li Yi searched for information in his mind, he shook his head and said, "This illness is extremely difficult to cure. We can only take more precautions and reduce the number of attacks." Li Yi wasn't a doctor. Moreover, even if modern doctors were here, they wouldn't be able to do anything without special medicine. To be able to become an imperial physician in the palace, they definitely had some skills. If even they couldn't cure it, how could Li Yi? He could only tell them some things to pay attention to from the perspective of avoiding contact with allergens. For example, they should frequently dry their bedding, open the windows frequently for ventilation, keep the room clean, and recommend the use of soap produced by Rui Workshop. As for food, they should eat less seafood and eat more red dates, lotus seeds, and yam. These were all things that were written in books. Li Yi organized his words. A guard had already brought a pen and paper, and the 2 imperial physicians were writing at a rapid speed. Li Yi glanced at them, but he didn't recognize any of the words written on the paper. It seemed that the prescription was not the original creation of Western medicine in that world. He only hoped that he could still recognize the words written by them tomorrow. Chapter 172. It's best not to have birds or beasts around His Majesty. Remember not to drink alcohol. After explaining all the precautions for asthma prevention, Li Yi was about to leave when he suddenly sniffed and smelled a familiar fragrance in the air. He seemed to think of something and asked, "Did the princess and her highness use perfume?" The 2 nodded at the same time and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" His Majesty's asthma cannot be smelled too strongly. Perfume and ruidu are both included. No wonder there was a similar smell in the room just now. Li Yi didn't notice it at that time. Now he remembered that the princess and the empress had probably stayed in that room. The emperor had asthma. It was a blessing from heaven that he didn't die of asthma after being attacked by the 2 women's perfume. The empress's expression changed when she heard this. She suddenly said, "Is it because of the ruidu that His Majesty's asthma has worsened these days?" Li Yi was stunned. Ruidu and perfume. She couldn't wait for the emperor to die. Quick, remember these 2 things. After listening to Li Yi's words, the empress told the imperial physician and hurriedly took the princess to take a bath. Emingzu also left silently. Before leaving, she glanced at Li Yi. When she passed by, Li Yi also smelled a familiar smell. 3. It seemed that this emperor must be a good emperor. He had done a lot of good deeds in his life. Otherwise he would not have lived until now. After bowing and bidding farewell, the guards naturally sent him away. Just as he went downstairs and walked a few steps, Li Xian followed him. For Li Xian, Li Yi was a huge treasure. Every time they met, he could dig out some treasure from him. The mystery in his heart was constantly refreshed. If he wanted to attract a man for a long time, he must always maintain a sense of mystery in front of him. In this regard, Li Yi obviously did a good job. Cough cough. From time to time the sound of Jing Di coughing could be heard in the room. Brother, should we call the imperial physician over? Prince Ning asked in a slightly worried tone when he saw this. Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, "There's no need. I know my body. It's fine now." Is Xian'er in contact with Li Yi often? After a while, the coughing gradually subsided and his voice was heard again. Yes, even in front of us Xian'er often mentions him. King Ning's voice paused before he added, Emingzu also seems to have a close relationship with him. Emperor Jing sat up and asked, "Have you investigated his background?" "I've already checked it thoroughly. There's nothing wrong with it." King Ning replied, "This boy is young but extremely talented. The few poems he has written are widely spread in Qing and Fu. Su Xuezheng once publicly called him the #1 scholar of the Jing kingdom. In addition, the Rui Dew and perfume and even the strong liquor that you praised so much today were all his works." King Ning continued, "His medical skills also seem to be very high. Not long ago Ro was suffering from a chronic illness. I searched everywhere for famous doctors but to no avail. Even the 2 imperial physicians were helpless. Yet she was easily cured by him. Brother should have some understanding of his medical skills." When King Ning said this, an unnatural expression appeared on Emperor Jing's face. Although he couldn't care so much at that time when he thought of the time he fainted Changde. He felt his stomach churn and forced himself not to think about this. After thinking for a while, he opened his mouth and said, "If that's the case, this boy can be considered an extraordinary person and can be of great use. I originally wanted to move him to the capital and train him for a few years. When he follows father in the future it would be good to leave a loyal official for him. Thinking about it carefully, this is still too ostentatious. I'm afraid he will be targeted by those people. In addition to Mingzhu's request, I'll let him stay here for now." Hearing this, King Ning was slightly shocked. He didn't think that his brother would think so highly of him. What the 2 of them talked about next was already a very secretive matter. He waved his attendants away, leaving only Elder Chong behind. No one else could hear the conversation between the 2 of them. At the same time, Li Yi had already walked out of the gates of the manor. He waved his hand at Li Xian, indicating that he didn't need to send him off. The banquet in the manor was still going on. The high officials and nobles ate, drank, laughed and chatted. The scholars were singing about romance. No one knew that just now, in the small building behind them, something big enough to shake the entire Jing kingdom had happened. What they were curious and confused about was why King Ning and the princess didn't show up tonight. Among the new Jinshi, Cui Yanxin and Jiangzi, and were probably the most depressed. One was really depressed because he had forced himself to write a new poem. The other was upset because he was rejected by the girl he once liked and could only drink the wine of the manor to relieve his worries. At this time, Li Yi had just come out of the manor and was about to walk back to his shop. He turned his head slightly and saw the figure still waiting by the roadside. "Miss Ruoqing, you haven't gone back yet?" he asked in confusion as he walked over. Lily, you're out?" Wan Ruoqing's face was still very pale. When she saw Li Yi, a smile appeared on her face. She bowed to him and said, "Thank you, Li, for helping Ruoqing just now." Li Yi waved his hand. "Let's not talk about this. You don't look very well. Do you need to see a doctor?" Wan Ruoqing smiled and said, "No need. I'm afraid the clinic is already closed. Let's talk about it tomorrow." Li Yi had stayed in the manor for about 2 hours. It wasn't too late yet. It was probably around 9 o'clock. The nightlife of the ancients wasn't that rich. After the sky darkened, other than the brothels and taverns that had a lot of customers at night, the other shops would basically be closed. Naturally, there was no way to find a doctor now. Although Qing and Prefecture also had a curfew and it probably started at this time, the management was relatively lax. In addition, tonight was a special occasion so one wouldn't be caught walking on the road. "Then I'll take you back first," Li Yi said in a gentlemanly manner. It wasn't safe for her to walk back alone in the middle of the night. Li, are you going back to Rui workshop?" Li Yi froze for a moment then nodded. "Then we're going the same way," Wan Ruoqing said with a smile. Li Yi wasn't surprised that she knew where he lived. Rui workshop had already become famous in Qing and Prefecture. Last time at the Mid-Autumn Poetry Meet, some bored person had put the title of the top scholar in the Jing kingdom on him. It had also made him a little famous. There was a high chance of being recognized on the road, so naturally his residence wasn't a secret. The two walked side by side. Before they left the boundaries of the manor, there was a sudden rush of footsteps behind them. "Master Li, please wait." Li Yi looked back and saw a white-haired old man jogging over. Chapter 173. The old man looked a little familiar. After thinking for a while, he remembered his identity. He was one of the imperial physicians who had been scolded by Steward Chong like a grandson just now. They were both old, but this imperial physician obviously didn't live as well as the other. After being scolded, he didn't even have the courage to talk back. "I'm Lu Jimin, the new imperial physician of this dynasty. Milord Li, please stay." This white-haired imperial physician Lu was old. He trotted all the way out of the prince's mansion and was still out of breath at this moment. "Milord Lu, is there something urgent?" Li Yi thought in his heart. Could it be that His Majesty's illness was acting up again? This time he wouldn't go back even if he was beaten to death. He only knew a little about modern first aid, but he knew nothing about medical skills. After all, medical skills were real skills. Even if he digested all the books about Chinese medicine in the library, he couldn't become a famous doctor. If His Majesty really died and he had an alibi, he couldn't be blamed, right? Moreover, this old man claimed to be the imperial physician of this dynasty and the dean of the Royal Medical College of the Jing Kingdom. He might be one of the best doctors in the whole country. If he couldn't do anything, it would be useless for him to go. Imperial physician Lu stood in the same place for a while and calmed his heartbeat. Then he looked at Li Yi and asked with a smile, "Milord Li, do you know medical skills?" Compared with the ministers in the capital, the imperial physician's rank was not high, but it was much higher than a small county officer of the 8th rank, so there was no need to call him milord. But he just saw with his own eyes that His Majesty appreciated this young man very much. What's more, if he hadn't saved His Majesty in time, he probably wouldn't have the opportunity to stand here now. Instead, he would be discussing with another medical deputy about who would be the first to lose his head. His Majesty's health had always been their biggest concern. This time, His Majesty suddenly fainted, and there was a great possibility that he would never wake up again. Even if he was present at that time, he couldn't guarantee that he could definitely save His Majesty. To some extent, the young man in front of them had done a lot for them. Putting all these aside, as a doctor, he was also extremely curious about the method Li Yi had used to save His Majesty. If they could learn this method, they wouldn't be at a loss when similar situations occur in the future. If they could spread this method to the world, allowing all doctors and even ordinary people to grasp it, how many lives would be saved? It would be a great deed that would benefit the people for generations to come. Medical skills? Li Yi was stunned for a moment, then he looked at Imperial Physician Lu and said, "Sorry, I don't know anything about this." What he said was the truth. Any middle school student in the 21st century would know a little about CPR and artificial respiration. Could it be that all of them knew medical skills? Imperial Physician Lu just casually asked. If he didn't know medicine, how could he treat His Majesty just now? In her heart, she had long regarded him as a person with extraordinary skills. As long as he waited for Li Yi's affirmative answer, he could continue to delve into this topic. At this moment, his mouth was opened halfway, but the words he wanted to say were blocked. After a moment of stunned, Imperial Physician Lu showed a dry smile on his face and said, "Milord Li is too modest. To be honest, I want to ask Milord Li for advice about the treatment just now." Speaking of this, Imperial Physician Lu glanced at Wan Ruoqing, who was beside Li Yi, but he didn't say the following words. His Majesty went out incognito this time, and even the civil and military officials in the court didn't know about it. Of course, he couldn't mention it in front of outsiders. Wan Ruoqing understood his meaning. She looked at Li Yi and said with a smile, "Milord Li still has something important to do, so Ruoqing will leave first." "What, Milord Li? We're all friends. You don't have to be so polite." Li Yi waved his hand, looked at Imperial Physician Lu and said, "Milord Lu, it's late and I have to send my friend back. Why don't we talk while walking? It's really inappropriate for this girl to walk alone in the middle of the night. I will accompany Milord Li for a walk." Imperial Physician Lu glanced at Wan Ruoqing and moved his eyebrows. Wan Ruoqing understood and silently walked behind them, keeping a distance from them. This old man thinks too much. It's good to have Miss Wan accompanying him. Who wants an old man to accompany her? When Li Yi was thinking about this in his heart, Imperial Physician Lu had already whispered, "I don't know if Milord Li can teach me the method of treating His Majesty just now. Milord Li knows that His Majesty's body is not well. If something like today happens again in the future, we can save His Majesty in time." For the symptoms of fainting, even the Imperial Physician Bureau didn't have any effective method at present. Today, seeing such a strange technique, Imperial Physician Lu would not let go of it for public or private reasons. It turns out that Milord Lu wants to learn this cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Only now did Li Yi understand that this was the purpose of this old man chasing him. It was not a big deal. There was no concept of patent in this world, and this was not like the formula of Ruidu that could make money. Teaching it to Imperial Physician Lu was also a thing to benefit society. Although Imperial Physician Lu had never heard of this name, he could still understand the words heart, lungs, and recovery. When he thought about how he could restore His Majesty's pulse in a short time, didn't it mean recovery? Milord Li is willing to teach me? He turned his head and looked at Li Yi with some excitement. This cardiopulmonary resuscitation is not a secret. If Milord Lu can learn it, it will also be a blessing for the common people. Li Yi said with a smile. Milord Li is so righteous. On behalf of the common people, I thank Milord Li. Imperial Physician Lu cupped his hands at Li Yi and said seriously, Milord Lu is too courteous. Li Yi waved his hand. When he spoke again, he had already started to introduce to Imperial Physician Lu the suitable occasions for CPR, the specific procedures and things to take note of. As the Imperial Physician and the Dean of the Jing Kingdom's Royal Academy of Medicine, Imperial Physician Lu was like a student who thirsted for knowledge. His face was solemn and he carefully remembered every word that Li Yi said in his heart. Wan Ruoqing was not far behind the two of them. She watched as Li Yi talked with the high-ranking official with fervor and assurance. The other party looked serious and serious. Her pretty face was slightly absent-minded. When they first met, he was still an unfamiliar scholar who stretched out his hand to ask for osmanthus cake from her. For the reward of 100 taels of silver, he helped Yunying Poetry Club compose 2 poems, which left a deep impression in her heart. Of course, at that time she did not know that he was the scholar who wrote Immortal on the Magpie Bridge and became popular in the prefectural city. When they met for the second time, it was at Mianxiu Garden, where the Mid-Autumn Poetry Meet was held. That day she was put in a difficult position by the second scholar of Qing and Prefecture, Xinzhao. He used Shuidiao Geti to shock everyone, and Xinzhao tore the poem out of anger. From then on, his reputation in Qing and Prefecture was not as good as before. But with just 2 poems, he was crowned the #1 scholar in Qing and Prefecture and even in the Jing Kingdom. He was probably the most unconventional #1 scholar in history. He never participated in poetry meets or poetry recitals, and he did not accept invitations from socialites. The strange items that he sold in his shop in the city were once again popular in the prefectural city. She only knew that the Rui Square next to the brothel was actually his shop when she saw him leave the shop once. Every time she went in and out of the shop, she slightly hoped for a chance encounter like that. Later on, she learned that he came and went without a pattern, so she did not run into him again. She did not expect that the two of them would meet again in such a way in the prince's mansion tonight. Writing a new poem to express sorrow, she softly murmured these words, and a trace of a smile appeared on her pale face. Chapter 174. In this way, this CPR can save lives in times of crisis and has the power to reverse the situation. If this skill can be popularized, it can not only reduce many unnecessary casualties in the army, but also be used in the common people. It's really a wonderful skill that will benefit the common people and the future generations. Your Excellency, Li should take the first credit. Li Yi told all the details about CPR to Dr. Lu. He didn't need to explain the principle. As the imperial physician and the head of the imperial physicians in the palace, it was like showing off one's slight skill in front of an expert if he talked too much in front of him. It was very important. After listening to Li Yi, Dr. Lu asked some questions about the details along the way. When he finally understood it completely, Li Yi had almost reached the door. I've been a doctor for dozens of years, but I've never heard of this CPR. I wonder which famous doctor is your master? Dr. Lu certainly didn't think that this unique secret skill was created by the young county magistrate Li in front of him. Although he was the imperial physician, he didn't think that his medical skills were the best in the world. In this world, there were still some famous doctors who devoted themselves to medical skills and didn't care about official career. In Dr. Lu's view, this CPR must be created by one of them. And this county magistrate Li was very likely to be their disciple or successor. To be honest, I don't know the name of the person who taught me this skill. Li Yi said with a little regret. What do you mean? Dr. Lu looked at him in doubt. It was a winter a few years ago. Li Yi's expression was solemn as he started to spout nonsense with a straight face. It was a cold winter that year. The north wind was biting cold and the snow blocked the mountain. One morning I opened the door and saw a white-haired old man lying in front of the door. When Imperial Physician Lu heard this, his expression became serious. According to the plot of the novel, this old man should be the famous doctor of the present age. It's snowing so heavily outside. If I left him alone, I'm afraid that the old man would freeze to death in front of the door. So I helped him into the house and made him some ginger soup to warm him up. Then I asked him to stay at home for a few days. When the snow melted, the old man bade farewell and left. Before he left, he taught me the CPR technique and I haven't heard from him since then. Li Yi sighed. His gaze was unfocused and a nostalgic expression appeared on his face. It seems that the old man must be one of the most extraordinary people in the world. Imperial Physician Lu's eyes lit up and then he sighed with some regret. Not being able to get to know such a person would be one of the greatest regrets in his life. Then he looked at Li Yi and a light flashed in his eyes. He said, just now when I talked with Lord Li, I found that Lord Li has a lot of unique views on medicine. It's really a waste of your talent to be a small county lieutenant here. Why don't I recommend Lord Li to the Imperial Physician Bureau and let Lord Li join the Imperial Physician Bureau? What do you think? Since this magistrate Li had interacted with a famous doctor for a few days, who knew what else he had learned other than CPR? After all, those people were moving treasures. Even the Imperial Physicians Bureau valued the medical experience they had accumulated over their lifetime. Li Yi sighed in his heart. From the officials to the emperor in the Jing Kingdom, they were all the same. They wanted someone to be an official just because they didn't agree with him. He hadn't even taken office as a county lieutenant, but the Imperial Physician Bureau had offered him an olive branch. What was so good about the Jing Kingdom? He didn't have a wife, a maid, or a sister-in-law. It was better to be a small county lieutenant here. Li Yi made a comparison and found that being a county lieutenant in Anxi County was not so bad. He turned his head to look at Imperial Physician Lu with a smile and said, Lord Lu, you're off topic. Imperial Physician Lu expressed his regret that Lord Li refused his proposal, but he could only regret it. If Lord Li didn't want to go to the Imperial Physician Bureau, he couldn't force him. When Imperial Physician Lu sighed, Li Yi raised his head. The signboard of Rui Workshop was already close at hand. Unknowingly, they had arrived at the door. Before he could say a few words to Miss Ruoqing, Li Yi saw that she was still far behind them. He felt a little sorry in his heart and walked over to her and said, Where does Miss Ruoqing live? Just in Rui. Wan Ruoqing smiled and raised her head to point at the brothel next to Rui Workshop. As soon as she raised her arm, she suddenly felt dizzy, and then she was swept by a deep tiredness. The last consciousness she had was probably that familiar voice anxiously calling, Miss Ruoqing, Miss Ruoqing. After that, she completely lost consciousness. Lord Lu, what's wrong with Miss Ruoqing? In a room in the backyard of Rui Workshop, Li Yi watched Imperial Physician Lu withdraw his hand from Ruoqing's wrist and asked. It's okay. Imperial Physician Lu smiled and said, Lord Li, don't worry. This girl is just too tired and physically weak. In addition, her monthly period is coming and she occasionally has a cold. I'll prescribe some medicine. If she takes it as a hint, she will recover in 2 days. Imperial Physician Lu went to write the prescription. Fong stood by the bed and looked at the beautiful girl lying on the bed of the son-in-law. He didn't understand it for a while. Didn't the son-in-law say that he was going to attend a banquet when he left? Or did he bring a girl back? Was the banquet held in the Jade Courtyard? Or the son-in-law said that he was going to attend the banquet was actually a cover, and his real purpose was to go there to have fun? But if he wanted to have fun, everyone was a man, so Fong could understand. But there was no need to bring a girl to his home. Son-in-law, it's so late at night and the pharmacy is closed. There is no place to buy medicine. Fong no longer thought about where Li Yi picked up the beautiful girl at night and said while holding the prescription. It doesn't matter. You take me to the pharmacy and there will be a way to buy medicine. Imperial Physician Lu heard the words and said with a smile. Tonight, County Magistrate Li did him a lot of kindness. Helping him do some small things was also a repayment. The identity of the Dean of the Royal Medical College was very useful at some times. Imperial Physician Lu and Fong didn't go out for a long time and came back with a few medicines. Behind them was an old doctor of the pharmacy, who stood respectfully behind Imperial Physician Lu. The old doctor stared at the back of Imperial Physician Lu with a look of worship. He didn't know that his idol had just been scolded like a grandson for a long time. Ruoqing would wake up after a short rest. After Imperial Physician Lu and Li Yi exchanged a few words, he left. Fong went outside to boil the medicine. The clay pot was also taken from the pharmacy. Li Yi sat in front of the bed and saw Ruoqing on the bed frowning slightly. Her face was pale. He reached out to touch her forehead and estimated that her body temperature had exceeded 38 degrees. Her body temperature was not low. He found the liquor that Fong had hidden in the pharmacy. After several distilling processes, the liquor had a temperature of 30 to 40 degrees, which could be used to cool down physically. He dipped a towel in alcohol and wiped some on her forehead and palms. As for other places, Li Yi didn't dare to touch them. Although the effect would be greatly reduced, there was no legitimate reason to take off a woman's clothes when she was asleep in this era. Ruoqing blinked her eyelashes. After she tried to open her eyes, she saw such a scene. Li Yi put one hand on her forehead and the other hand touched his own forehead. He was still muttering. It's a little cooler than before. The fever seems to have gone down. Chapter 175. Li. She had just woken up and had not fully recovered her consciousness. She looked at Li Yi and blinked her eyes innocently. You're awake? Li Yi withdrew his hand from her forehead and said, This is Rui House. You just fainted outside. He paused and said, You're not feeling well. Instead of resting at home you went to sing that song. Ruoqing's pretty face showed a bitter smile. Some things were beyond her control. For them she had long been used to these things. She supported her body to sit up and said apologetically, I'm sorry to have troubled you. Don't always call me young master. I'm not used to it. Li Yi waved his hand and said, The medicine is being brewed outside. Since you live in the brothel next door you don't have to rush back. Drink the medicine before you leave. By the way, have you eaten? Ruoqing shook her head. As performers and singers they couldn't eat too much before performing. They could only eat 20% full. Any more would affect their singing. Every time she went out to perform she was used to bringing some osmanthus cakes. When she was really hungry she would eat 2 pieces. Tonight she had already distributed all the cakes she brought to others. It just so happens that I'm not full either. You sit here for a while. Although it was not a good habit to eat after 9 o'clock in the evening, it was not appropriate for her to drink medicine on an empty stomach. In addition, Li Yi did not have enough to eat in the prince's mansion. Because of the emperor's fainting he was really a little hungry now. Fong set up a fire in the corner of the yard and waited for the medicine in the clay pot to be done. Seeing Li Yi go into the kitchen and start to work he looked into the room and sighed deeply. Does the son-in-law want to keep that woman for the night? Since the son-in-law did not hide from him, it showed that he had absolute trust in him. But if he helped him hide it he felt sorry for First Mississippi. In Fong's heart he began a new struggle. After a moment he still made a decision. Some things were done wrong once and they would continue to be wrong. The more he hid it from First Miss the less guilty he felt. Ruoqing watched Li Yi go out and sat up straight on the bed. There was a small stool next to the bed with a small jar of wine on it. She could smell it from the smell of the wine jar. He touched his forehead and felt that it was ice cold. He brought his palm closer to his forehead and sniffed it. There was a faint smell of alcohol. She had recovered a lot at this time. Although her body was still a little uncomfortable, the dizziness was gone. Just now she vaguely felt that someone was wiping her forehead and palm. It shouldn't be an illusion. Although she didn't know the reason why she felt better should have something to do with this. Just now, the imperial physician had humbly consulted in front of him. His medical skills should be very good. Various thoughts flashed through her mind. After a while she raised her head and began to observe her surroundings. It wasn't a big room. She was currently on a bed in the corner. The room's furnishings were very simple. There was a bed, a table and a chair. There was a wooden shelf with toiletries on it. It was easy to see at a glance. There were no books, brush, ink, paper or inkstone in the room. On the wall opposite her there was a strange painting. The reason why it was strange was that this painting was obviously not the mainstream painting method, nor was it a three-dimensional painting that she had seen before. Instead, it was somewhat similar to the painting method on the sky prayer lantern that she still had in her collection. The lines were extremely simple and casual. The thing in the painting was like a house cat. It had 3 whiskers on its left and right sides. Its eyes and nose were small round dots. There was no mouth, and there was a strange thing on its left ear, which she had never seen before. A strange scholar, a strange painting. Thinking about it this way, it didn't seem that strange anymore. The porridge on the stove would take a while to be ready. Li Yi came in with a bowl, walked to the bed and handed it to her, then said, "Drink more brown sugar and ginger water, it's good for your body." Brown sugar and ginger water could disperse the cold, stop coughing and stop vomiting. It was much gentler than drinking medicine. Of course, Imperial physician Lu said that her menstruation was coming. Menstruation was the meaning of the great aunt. Brown sugar could replenish the blood, so it should be good for her to drink it, right? Li Yi did not stay in the shop for long, so the furnishings in the room were very simple. But because he had to cook for himself, the kitchen had all kinds of utensils, seasonings and so on. Brown sugar and ginger were all there. Wan Ruoqing took the bowl in a daze. As a woman, she naturally knew the effects of brown sugar and ginger water. Every month, when her menstruation came, she would cook some to drink almost every day. What did he mean by what he just said? Did he know that she... Thinking that the white-haired old man was an imperial physician in the palace, Wan Ruoqing's pretty face turned red. When Li Yi returned to the kitchen, he looked at her strangely. This woman was really strange. Just now her face was as white as paper and now it turned red. The porridge was ordinary porridge with 2 side dishes. It was not a good habit to eat at night, but it was okay to indulge once in a while. After Wan Ruoqing drank the medicine, Li Yi sent her to the door. Entering the entrance of the brothel, Li Yi was surprised to find that Rui Square and the place where Wan Ruoqing lived were only separated by a wall. "Sister Ruoqing, you are back? How was the prince's mansion? Did you have fun?" It was a young girl who opened the door. When she saw Wan Ruoqing, her pretty face lit up. She chattered a few words, only to find that there was a stranger standing beside her. She suddenly froze there. "Remember to drink the medicine on time." Li Yi exhorted her, waved his hand and turned back. Hearing the girl ask several times, such as, "Sister Ruoqing, who is he?" the sound of the door closing came from behind. In Rui Square, the expression on Fang's face was obviously much more relaxed. The son-in-law did not keep the girl for the night, so there was no need to consider the problem of loyalty. It was the best ending for both the son-in-law and eldest Mississippi. In Prince Ning's mansion, Cui Yanqing gulped down another mouthful of wine. His head was already dizzy. Brother Cui bottoms up. Opposite him, Jiang Zifen raised his wine cup. Tonight, the two could be regarded as brothers in hardship. One was hurt and the other was humiliated. Unexpectedly, they had a feeling of sympathy for each other. "She is just a minor 8th-rank county officer and she dares to humiliate me like this. That actress is also blind. When the appointment of the imperial court comes, Brother Xian will at least be a 7th-rank official, but she actually ignores Brother Xian." Cui Yanqing's tone was still indignant. After saying that, he did not forget to stab Jiang Zian in the back. A trace of gloominess appeared in Jiang Zian's eyes. He raised his head and drank up the wine in his cup but did not speak. "That seems to be County Magistrate Lu?" Cui Yanqing put down his wine cup, glanced around and saw a person not far away. After a moment of surprise, he walked over there. Chapter 176. Cui Yanqing and Jiang Zian were both from Qing'an Prefecture, but they weren't students of Anxi County, so they didn't have much contact with County Magistrate Lu before. Of course, with their previous status, they couldn't reach this level either. However, things were different now. According to the past practice of the imperial court, the new jinshi every year was more important, and the lowest rank would be appointed as a 7th-grade county magistrate, who had a brighter future than those who became officials through other channels. In this way, They naturally had the qualifications to be on an equal footing with County Magistrate Lu. Seeing Cui Yanxin stand up and walk towards County Magistrate Lu, Jiang Xian's eyes flickered. After a little hesitation he also stood up. "Let me propose a toast to County Magistrate Lu." Cui Yanxin walked up to County Magistrate Lu and said with a smile as he raised his glass. County Magistrate Lu smelled a strong smell of alcohol from a few steps away. County Magistrate Lu raised his head and frowned slightly. He had seen the conflict between Cui Yanxin and County Magistrate Li just now, so he naturally didn't like Cui Yanxin. However, one shouldn't hit a smiling person, so he symbolically raised his glass, took a sip and put it down. He was a little tipsy just now, but after seeing the scene by chance he sobered up a little and didn't dare to drink anymore. Cui Yanxin drank all the wine in his glass, and when he lowered his head he saw that County Magistrate Lu's glass was still full. A trace of displeasure appeared on his face, but it soon disappeared. At this moment, Jiang Xian walked over and also said, "Junior Magistrate Lu," and bowed to County Magistrate Lu. Among the new jinshi in Qing and Prefecture, Anxi County accounted for more than half of them. "Lord Lu, you're really good at teaching." Cui Yanxin complimented County Magistrate Lu after sitting down in front of him. County Magistrate Lu sneered in his heart. Anxi County was the largest county in Qing and Prefecture, and its students were far better than other counties in both quantity and quality. The prefectural school was full of talents, and every year's imperial examination was like this. Obviously this guy was up to no good. It's all thanks to the prefectural magistrate and Professor Feng. "I don't dare to take credit," County Magistrate Lu said lightly. County Magistrate Lu's indifferent attitude made Cui Yanxin and Jiang Xian suspicious, wondering if they had offended him in some way. They racked their brains for a long time but still couldn't remember. Cui Yanxin was in a bad mood tonight. He just embarrassed a lowly actor, but he was slapped in the face by Li with a poem and became a laughingstock in the eyes of the public. Now he wanted to come over to get close to County Magistrate Lu. It would be best if he could make trouble for the county magistrate in the future. Unexpectedly, he was blocked by County Magistrate Lu's cold attitude before he said it. After becoming a new jinshi, his self-confidence swelled a little. The Cui family was also a rich and powerful family with a lot of people in the imperial court. His official career would be smooth sailing in the future, so he didn't pay attention to a small county magistrate at all. With the help of the wine, he said in a strange tone, "I didn't know that such a powerful figure like County Magistrate Li had appeared in your county. Even the prince attached great importance to your poetic talent. County Magistrate Lu's subordinates are really full of talents." For County Magistrate Lu, this sentence was not a compliment but a sarcasm. If County Magistrate Lu heard Cui Yanxin's words a few days ago, he would definitely be very unhappy. After all, he was the county magistrate of Anxi. No one would feel good if he was overshadowed by an assistant official. But after witnessing so many things with his own eyes, he had long given up these thoughts. The heir, the prince, the princess, the emperor. Which one of these people could be contacted by a small county magistrate like him? How could he dare to have a trace of dissatisfaction in his heart when he could talk and laugh with the emperor? Perhaps this was the opportunity for him, County Magistrate Lu, to make further progress in his life. In this case I have to congratulate County Magistrate Lu," Jiang Xian said with a fake smile. As a county magistrate he would definitely feel uncomfortable if his limelight was overshadowed by a county magistrate. Jiang Xian simply added fuel to the fire. If County Magistrate Lu had a grudge against him, he would definitely have a hard time in the future. "I don't need you two to worry about my affairs," County Magistrate Lu said coldly with a wave of his sleeve. How could he not hear the hidden meaning in their words? He was slightly angry. After all, the two of them had not been appointed officials yet, but they dared to mock him. If they weren't in the prince's mansion, he would have probably reprimanded them. "I'm afraid that the person surnamed Li will become arrogant because of the favor. If that happens, County Magistrate Lu will probably have a headache," Cui Yanxin said with a faint smile as he looked at County Magistrate Lu. It was already somewhat presumptuous for a new jinshi to say such words to a county magistrate. However, Cui Yanxin had the backing of the Cui clan, so she naturally looked down on officials like County Magistrate Lu, who had no background and was born in a poor family. Secondly, she really drank a lot tonight. This place was remote and there was no one around, so she naturally spoke more casually. Hearing this, County Magistrate Lu couldn't help but stand up from his seat no matter how good-tempered he was. However, before he could reprimand them, another stern voice suddenly exploded behind them. Presumptuous. Cui Yanxin and Zhang Xian suddenly turned around. When they saw a middle-aged man with a cold face standing behind them, cold sweat rolled down their foreheads. Their legs became weak and they almost collapsed to the ground. Prince, bastard, is this all you've learned after studying the books of sages for so many years? With the cold voice of Prince Ning, Cui Yanxin and Zhang Xian's hearts sank to the bottom. Is that Prince? In the distance, the officials who were talking also noticed the abnormality here. After looking at each other, they stood up and gathered here. The second night watch had passed and it was late at night. The banquet in the prince's mansion was finally over. The guests from Qing and prefecture all stood up and said goodbye. Carriages drove away from the gate of the prince's mansion. The curfew in the city was nothing to him. The patrolling soldiers had already received orders and wouldn't stop them. The prince's mansion would naturally arrange a place for the guests who came from further places to rest. When Cui Yanxin and Zhang Xian walked out of the prince's mansion, they were still a little muddle-headed. Their minds were blank, and the only thought left in their minds was how to save their official careers that had turned from bright to gloomy. There were also other officials who walked out of the gate and looked at their backs, shaking their heads and sighing. The two had just talked nonsense in the prince's mansion and happened to be heard by Prince Ning. Then they were reprimanded mercilessly. For the new Jinshi, the imperial court would first look at the evaluation of the local officials before officially appointing them. This was related to the official careers of the scholars in the prince's mansion. According to the usual practice, most people would praise them. But this time Cui Yanxin and Zhang Xian might have a stain on them that couldn't be erased. As the people that Ning Wang had heavily mentioned, if the two of them wanted to get a good job, it was almost a pipe dream. Of course, everyone remembered the county lieutenant Li, who was the source of all this, although he only showed up for a short time. Chapter 177. There were no walls in the world that didn't have a crack. The events that happened at Ning Wang Fu's banquet last night spread throughout the scholars the next day. Of course, a large part of the reason why the news spread so quickly was because of the phrase, to write a new poem forcefully expressing sorrow, which made countless scholars feel like they were being shot in the knees. After some scholars heard this poem, they looked at the work they were proud of before. The words revealed all kinds of sorrow. Their faces turned red and they hid it well, not easily showing it to others again. Living in the prosperous Jiangnan area, the world was stable, the years were peaceful, and when they had nothing to do, they would recite poems and write some lyrics. This was the life of a scholar. However, if they didn't have enough experience, it was impossible to compose good poems. They read all day, held poetry meetings, and when they were in the mood, they would go to the brothels to experience the suffering of the common people. How could there be so much hatred between the country and the family? But in order to write a poem, they could only forcefully express sorrow. Moaning without illness, expressing sorrow without worry, this imperceptibly increased the pompous style of poetry in the literary circles of Jiangnan. However, even though everyone was well aware of this, they wouldn't point it out. After all, in order to write a poem, they couldn't personally go to the border to experience the situation at the border, and experience the pain of the destruction of their country. And this phrase, to write a new poem forcefully expressing sorrow, was like a fierce slap to their faces, reminding them to face reality. It was likely that in the future, when someone wrote this kind of poem again, they would have to weigh in their heart whether or not it was forcefully expressing sorrow. As the poem became more and more popular, it swept through the brothels and was heard by more and more people. As time went by, the pompous style of the entire poetry world actually decreased. Of course, this was a story for the future. At this time, the culprit that caused this matter was in his own courtyard, enjoying the warm wind, lying on a rocking chair leisurely. Li was very idle. He hadn't gone to the shop to take a look for a few days. Rui Du and spirits brought in a large amount of profit every day, most of which came from the share of the prince's mansion. Rui Workshop's business was better than before, but its share in the total income was decreasing. If he was alone, he would probably close the shop and wait for the money to come in. However, Rui workshop was related to the livelihood of many people in the stockade. They were willing to do it, and Li Yi was happy to be a hands-off shopkeeper. He had been waiting for Jinshan for the past few days. Counting the days, the emperor should have returned to the palace a long time ago. The reward he mentioned that night should still be valid, right? 100 mu of fertile land and 100 bolts of silk. Of course, the most important thing was the 10,000 taels of gold. How long would it take to spend it all? Li Yi's desire to earn money diminished as he thought about all the money that was flying toward him. Lying on the rocking chair, some parts of his body were still faintly aching. This was because he had been training excessively for the past 2 days. He couldn't afford to offend his fiery sister-in-law. He had only accidentally seen her washing her belly band in the courtyard 2 days ago. Did she have to take revenge on him like this? If he hadn't asked Rui to massage him a few times with her unique method, he would probably still be trembling when he walked. A burst of noise suddenly came from outside the door. The courtyard door wasn't closed. 2 pale, beardless men with cold and arrogant expressions pushed the door open and entered. Li Yi looked up and saw 2 familiar eunuchs. He couldn't help but feel happy. The people who delivered money had come. The 2 of you must have had a hard time coming from afar. Would you like to come in and have a cup of tea first? This time, Li Yi's attitude toward the 2 was completely different from before. He was extremely enthusiastic. After all, this time they were here to deliver money. He couldn't go against anyone but gold. Li Yi's attitude also stunned the 2 eunuchs who delivered the imperial edict. They felt quite flattered. It had only been a few days, but the 2 eunuchs were not used to such a big change in attitude. But at least they got a smile this time. The 2's cold expressions softened a little and their tone was much gentler than before. They said, "His Majesty has an imperial edict. County Lieutenant Li accept it." Xiao Huan was taken down the mountain by her sister Rui to go shopping. There was only Li Yi at home. When the 2 eunuchs entered the village just now, they must have made a lot of noise again. Looking out of the door, many people looked inside curiously. What was wrong with the son-in-law of Rui's family? It had only been a few days. Why did an imperial edict come again? For generations they probably hadn't seen an imperial edict even once. Now they saw it twice in a few days. Although the imperial edict wasn't for them, they had something to brag about when they went out in the future. "I've knelt in front of an imperial edict. That thing is rare. Have you seen it before?" Therefore, before Li Yi knelt, a lot of people knelt outside the door first. Anxi County Lieutenant Li Yi created the method of cardiopulmonary resuscitation. A eunuch began to read the imperial edict expressionlessly. The imperial edict didn't mention anything about Li Yi's meritorious service in rescuing the emperor. After all, the emperor had snuck out this time, so he couldn't be too ostentatious. He used the reason that Li Yi had contributed the method of cardiopulmonary resuscitation. He said a lot of praises but didn't get to the main point. With 100 generations of meritorious service, you will be rewarded with 100 bolts of silk, 100 acres of fertile land and 10,000 gold. When the eunuch finished reading, Li Yi already couldn't wait to take the imperial edict. He said, "Thank you for your grace, your majesty." After going through a set of formal procedures, it was naturally the part that Li Yi was most looking forward to next. The bailiffs that came along moved the silk into the courtyard in piles. Li Yi had seen the land deed with his own eyes. However, when all the bailiffs returned to their original positions and stopped moving things into the house, Li Yi still hadn't seen the 10,000 gold that he had been looking forward to for a long time. "Where's the 10,000 gold?" Li Yi looked at one of the eunuchs and asked. "Did they forget about it?" The eunuch pointed at a rather luxurious box in the middle of the silk and said, "It's over there." When Li Yi looked at the box, he couldn't help but have a thought. "Are you king kidding me? How does this broken little box look like it can contain 10,000 gold taels?" He ran over to open the box and saw the copper coins lying inside. "This is the 10,000 gold?" Li Yi asked uncertainly. "This is the 10,000 gold. Not a penny less," the eunuch said with a nod. Li Yi was stunned for a while. When he raised his head again, he looked at the eunuch in a somewhat unfriendly way. "You two are a bit too unkind. These copper coins are worth at most 1 tael of gold. Where did you hide my gold? Let me tell you, I'm very familiar with your supervisor Chong." Li Yi was very angry. Even if they secretly kept dozens or hundreds of taels of gold for the 10,000 gold taels, he wouldn't care about it. After all, they came all the way here and he should pay them for their hard work. But these 10,000 gold taels were only left with a pile of copper coins when they were sent here. This was too black-hearted. Feng didn't care about such a little money now, did he? Hearing this, the two eunuchs faintly twitched the corners of their mouths. Did this county magistrate think that the 10,000 gold meant 10,000 gold taels? If so, they were afraid that the national treasury would be emptied after a few more rewards from His Majesty. Chapter 178. The two eunuchs could not stand the resentment in Li Yi's eyes. After announcing the rewards, they could not wait to leave the courtyard and gallop away on their horses. They did not receive any gifts as thanks this time, but they did not care about it anymore. They only hoped that they would not encounter such a difficult task in the future. In the beginning, Li Yi wanted to give the two eunuchs a small token of appreciation. After all, they had come all the way from the capital and were tired. It would not be too much of a heartache to give away 10 taels of gold. However, he did not expect that 10,000 taels of gold would become 1 tael of gold. If he gave more, he would have to pay for it. However, he did not know that the people who received rewards in the past only cared about the emperor's gift itself. They did not attach much importance to money. Since ancient times, he was probably the only one who had such an unconventional idea. The mountain of gold that he had been looking forward to for a long time had flown away. Li Yi was a little disappointed. It was true that those who did not study enough would suffer. Who knew that even the rewards here were so routine? 10,000 taels of gold was equivalent to 10,000 copper coins. It was extremely fake and empty. Why did they not just say 10,000 copper coins in the beginning? Forget it. Since the emperor thought that his life was only worth 1 tael of gold and a few mu of land, what else could he say? It seemed that he could not expect a free lunch from the sky. A happy life had to be built with his own hands. When Lu Rui and the other two girls arrived at the door, the crowd outside had not dispersed yet. Looking through the gate, one could see a pile of neatly arranged cloth. According to the official who had just read the imperial edict, His Majesty the Emperor had awarded 100 mu of good farmland to Rui's husband. It should be known that good farmland was not like the land in the stockade village. Every year it produced more grain. If the stockade village had so much good farmland, it would not have ended up in such a situation. Rui is back. Seeing Lu's sister Rui walking over, the crowd hurriedly made way for them. They looked at them with envy. The two lonely and helpless children in the past had now risen to the top, and no one could casually bully them. Rui is back. Go back quickly. Another official from the capital came to your house just now. They gave you a lot of good things this time. Everyone was talking at once and their expressions were one of envy and awe. It was said that the emperor's grace was vast, but why did it always fall on the head of young Master Rui? It had only been a few days, but His Majesty had rewarded him with an official position and a piece of land. Rui's husband had obtained the emperor's favor. In the future he would be a high-ranking official and they might be able to benefit from it. Recalling how they had made things difficult for Sister Rui in the past, some of them were filled with regret. Back then, I was really blind. At first, when Lu Rui saw so many people at the door, she thought that something big had happened at home. She was a little anxious, but after hearing what they said, she was relieved. She said a few polite words to the crowd and hurried into the yard. Holding the things she bought at the foot of the mountain, Xiao Huan also hurriedly ran to the courtyard. She was careless and tripped over the threshold. Fortunately, Lu Rui caught her in time. Standing in the yard, Li Yi looked at the pile of copper coins. The more he looked at it, the angrier he became. If he kept it, he would always think of this infuriating thing. If he threw it away, he couldn't bear to. Husband, this is. When Lu Rui walked into the yard, the first thing she saw was the silk cloth. She walked to Li Yi's side and her pretty face was full of confusion. She knew that Li Yi was rewarded with the title of county lieutenant, and it seemed that it was because of an article he wrote. But why was it this time? She originally thought that maybe she could live a peaceful life, but since a decision a few months ago, her whole life had changed dramatically and she couldn't adapt to it. I accidentally did something that benefited the people again. These are all rewards from His Majesty. Li Yi sighed and said, "How can you say that you have benefited the people?" Lu Rui smiled. She was already used to Li Yi's words. She asked doubtfully, "Since it is a reward, why do you frown?" "That's too little." Li Yi's voice was heard. Lu Rui's pretty face froze. There was actually someone who thought that the reward from His Majesty was too little. If the current emperor knew what he was thinking, would he take back the reward he had been given? However, thinking of the last time when he was appointed as an official, it was not so strange for him to have such thoughts. Xiao Huan looked at the fine silk cloth in the courtyard and mumbled. If she knew there was so much cloth at home, she wouldn't have bought it in the city. After painstakingly carrying it up, she found that there was already a pile of fine silk cloth in the courtyard. There were so many bolts of cloth, enough to make a few hundred sets of clothes for the 3 women at home. Li Yi didn't intend to put the things bestowed by the emperor at home, and he didn't have free space, so he asked Xiao Huan to send 1 bolt to each of his sisters. There were still a lot left, and he planned to sell them at the foot of the mountain when he had the chance. The silk cloth bestowed by the emperor should be sold at a higher price, right? Throughout the history of the Jing kingdom, the emperors were not narcissistic enough to force others to put up the things bestowed by them. It was not uncommon to give the emperor's rewards to others or sell them for money. Although the emperor would feel uncomfortable if he knew, it was not a crime. There was only half a month left before he took office. In recent days, Lu Rui's training of him was obviously stricter. In addition to some basic skills, Li Yi would spend about 2 hours every day to learn a set of saber skills. The position of county lieutenant was still a little dangerous. It was better to improve his combat effectiveness. In case of an accident, he still needed some ability to protect himself. Fortunately, although the growth of true qi was slow, the speed at which he learned the moves was still very scary. With only a saber manual, Li Yi could imitate it after reading it once. Of course, it was just the appearance. In the eyes of Lu Rui, they were full of loopholes. Every time he saw it, he would mercilessly point it out for him. Mistakes should be corrected. In terms of martial arts, Rui could not tolerate any sand in his eyes. Before, Li Yi still laughed at imperial physician Lu. This time he finally understood his previous mood. Regardless of whether she was really strict or using her position to avenge a personal grudge, at the very least, she was still very responsible when it came to teaching him martial arts. Li Yi did not pursue the matter from before. He only asked her a question about which came first, the chicken or the egg. Then he slowly strolled out of the courtyard. "Young master, you are here?" Passing through half of the village, he walked into a relatively dilapidated courtyard. A white-haired old man was sitting in the courtyard, holding a carpenter's tools in his hand, and he was busy doing something. Hearing the sound, he turned around and saw Li Yi. The old man immediately put down the tools in his hand, stood up and said with a smile, "Uncle Han, how is the thing I asked you to make last time?" Li Yi put down the bag of rice and noodles in his hand and asked with a smile. Uncle Han was the carpenter who helped him make the rocking chair. In fact, with his age, he was far from being an old man in the future. But in this era, the average life expectancy of people was not long. After the age of 30, people could touch their beards and call themselves old man. Perhaps because he had suffered a lot in his life, Uncle Han was in his early 50s, but his hair was already gray and he looked a lot older. "It has been ready for a long time. I was just waiting for you to pick it up." Uncle Han smiled and said kindly. Chapter 179. With Uncle Han's decades of carpentry skills, there were only a few details that needed to be improved on. Li Yi put down the rice and noodles, pointed out the few improvements, and walked out of the courtyard not long after. He wanted to leave some money as a reward, but Uncle Han insisted on not accepting it, so he could only give up. When he returned home, Lu Rui was still thinking about the question he left behind before he left. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Actually, Li Yi did not know the answer to this question. Even in the 21st century, this was a question that the scientific community debated endlessly. There were all kinds of theories circulating on the internet, but at least before Li Yi left, there was no conclusion as to whether it was correct or not. If one pondered over this question for a long time, it might become a question of philosophers and extend to the question of the origin of mankind or the universe. "I don't know," Li Yi answered honestly. "You don't know?" Lu Rui clenched her teeth tightly. She actually did not know the answer to this question that she had racked her brains for. It seemed that there was a need to spar with him during the practice tomorrow to see how well he had mastered those moves. Seeing that she was on the verge of going berserk, the resentment that had accumulated over the past few days finally dissipated a little. However, when her expression returned to normal the next moment, Li Yi had an inexplicable feeling that something was wrong. "Oh yeah, do you have any convenient hidden weapons?" He shook his head to the back of his head and asked her. Although he had been practicing his saber skills for the past few days, the few moves that he had learned could only be used to deal with ordinary people. If he encountered someone who knew a little bit of martial arts, it would not make a difference whether he had a weapon or not. Practicing martial arts was not something that could be done overnight. In order to increase his sense of security, he needed to find another way. "No," Lu Rui said without thinking. Among all kinds of weapons, hidden weapons had always been looked down upon by the righteous people as an unorthodox method. In the martial world, those who had a little bit of fame would not use hidden weapons. Then she added, "Even if you do, you won't be able to use it with your current skills." Li Yi knew that she was telling the truth. After all, one must have enough strength to throw a dart to hurt someone. Although he was slightly stronger than an ordinary person under Rui's hellish training, he was still far from that level. He rolled his eyes at Lu Rui and said, "That's why I'm asking if you have any convenient hidden weapons that can be used by ordinary people. For example, have you heard of pear blossom storm needles? When they are used, blood will be drawn. If there's poison on them, even a normal person can kill a martial artist." "Never heard of it." Lu Rui shook his head and said, "There are a few sects in Jianghu that specialize in using concealed weapons, and they may have the concealed weapons you mentioned. As for coating the concealed weapons with poison, this is a taboo in Jianghu. Once the matter is exposed, you will be hunted by the entire Jianghu. On the path of martial arts, practicing diligently is the right path. Don't think about taking the crooked path all day long." In Jianghu there were both good and evil sections. But no matter who was good or evil, they all despised this kind of despicable behavior of secretly hurting people. A martial artist with excellent martial arts was killed by an ordinary person with a poisonous concealed weapon. It was too unjust, and there was no dignity of a martial artist at all. Therefore, for this kind of thing, the two sects that had always been at odds with each other actually reached an agreement to resist it together. In Jianghu, martial artists who were famous for their concealed weapons were rare. Originally, he just wanted to ask her about concealed weapons. It would be best if he could get a suitable concealed weapon. In the end, not only did he not achieve his goal, but he was also taught a lesson by her for no reason. There was still half a month before he took office. Since he had nothing to do, Li Yi decided to take a look at his land. 10,000 gold was 10,000 copper coins, but there was no such trick on the land. He said it was 100 acres of fertile land, and it was really 100 acres. He didn't know if the low-ranking official who divided the land did it on purpose, but the land that was divided for Li Yi happened to be in the Li family village. But thinking about it, a low-ranking official shouldn't have this power, and the person who finally agreed on this matter should be County Magistrate Lu. As a matter of fact, since the day Li Yi escaped from the village, he hadn't been here again. Led by a low-ranking official, when he walked to the Li family village, a group of people stood neatly at the entrance of the village. As early as a few days ago, the Yamen had sent someone to inform them that His Majesty had given the land here to the county magistrate, which meant that in the future, they would no longer pay rent to the government, but would give it to the county magistrate. In the distance they saw a person in the uniform of a bailiff leading a few people over. A white-haired old man was about to go forward, but when he saw the young man walking in the middle, a trace of joy appeared on his old face. He quickly walked up, grabbed Li Yi's arm and said, "Hey boy, you're finally back. Where have you been these months? The government has come to look for you several times. Last time, 2 eunuchs wanted to deliver the imperial edict to the Li family village, but they were stopped by Emingzu. Later they learned that Li Yi lived in the Willow Leaf village, so they didn't come here. Therefore, the people of the Li family village didn't know that the county magistrate was the boy from the Li family who they had watched grow up. How can you talk to the county magistrate like that?" Seeing that the head of the Li family village was so rude to the county magistrate, the low-ranking official reprimanded him with a cold face. "What? County magistrate?" The old man was stunned and looked up at Li Yi with his eyes full of doubt. "County magistrate?" The villagers of the Li family village who were about to come over to greet Li Yi also stopped and looked at him with surprise and doubt. Since when did Li Xiaozai become the county magistrate? This is the new county magistrate of this county. He was appointed by His Majesty. Don't be rude, the low-ranking official looked around and said. It was said that County Magistrate Li grew up in Li's village, so he must have a lot of elders here. However, things were different now. County Magistrate Li was deeply favored by the emperor. Even County Magistrate Lu specially told him to be as respectful to County Magistrate Li as he was to County Magistrate Lu. If these people still put on airs of elders in front of County Magistrate Li, it would be a little too disrespectful. After the low-ranking official spoke again, the old man realized that the young man in front of him who he had watched grow up was no longer the junior of the Li family who only knew how to read books. I'm the head of the Li family village. Greetings, County Magistrate. He hurriedly let go of his hand and bowed respectfully. Seeing the first person he met after coming to this world again, Li Yi had an indescribable feeling in his heart. What happened a few months ago seemed like it happened yesterday. If the old man hadn't asked people to arrest him, Li Yi wouldn't have escaped, and naturally there would be no subsequent events. He wouldn't have met Rui Xiao Huan Fong, and of course he wouldn't have met Li Xian and Emingzu. He might still be a county magistrate in the Li family village who didn't know the next meal. Sometimes things like fate were so magical. The moment his life really began in this world was probably the moment when the old man shouted that he was going to be arrested. Thinking of the old man's face full of concern when he came over just now, Li Yi smiled and went forward to help him up, saying, "Old man, please get up. I was ill a few days ago and forgot everything. May I know your name?" Not expecting that County Magistrate Li would help him up in person, the old man was a little flattered. Seeing that County Magistrate Li was kind and more quick-witted than before, he felt relieved and said, "County Magistrate Li used to call me Uncle Li." But he was puzzled in his heart. Why had he never heard that madness could make people lose their memories? Hearing this, the low-ranking official frowned again. This old man is really insensible. Didn't I just tell him not to be rude to County Magistrate Li? The past is the past and now is the present. Why doesn't he understand the rules? When he was about to speak, Li Yi waved his hand and then looked at the old man and said, "After I recovered, I really can't remember the past. Uncle Li, can you tell me what happened before?" "Ah, you asked the right person. I watched you grow up and I even remember clearly that you wet the bed when you were a child." Speaking of this, the old man's face glowed and he began to talk incessantly. Chapter 180. The old man had seen this familiar face since he was a child. Li Yi did not put on the airs of a county lieutenant and was the head of the Li family village. The white-haired old man felt like he was seeing the child from the Li family again. The sense of familiarity returned and he was no longer afraid, so he began to talk freely. The old man stroked his beard and his wrinkled face revealed a look of reminiscence. "This matter started more than 10 years ago on the night you were born." The county yamen clerk beside Li Yi twitched his mouth when he saw the old man immersed in his memories. Seeing that the county lieutenant was listening attentively, he shut his mouth. At this time, the fear in the hearts of the Li family villagers gradually dissipated, and they slowly gathered around. At that time I often saw the county lieutenant sitting at the door reading. When I was a child I knew that Li, county lieutenant, would definitely be successful in the future. "County lieutenant, do you still remember when my son fought with you when he was a child and I beat him half to death?" The villagers did not know when it started, but their fear had disappeared and they began to talk at once. However, they still addressed Li Yi as county lieutenant and were no longer as casual as before. From the messy information they revealed, Li Yi was able to sort out many things. The original owner of this body grew up in the Li family village. His mother passed away when he was young, and his father raised him alone until he was a teenager before he passed away due to illness. The father of the original owner of this body was the only county scholar in the village. He had repeatedly failed in the imperial examinations and seemed to be disheartened. He placed all his hopes on the next generation and taught Li Yi strictly from a young age. As a result, the young Li Yi was the only one of his age who could read and write. Later, Li Xiaoxia passed away due to illness, and the few acres of land that he owned were taken care of by the villagers. Every household would take turns to help him out. This was also because Li Xiaoxia was the only scholar in the village. Whenever a family needed to write a letter, he would write it for them. When a new wife gave birth to a child, She would ask him for help when it came time to name the child. She remembered his kindness and took good care of the child. Of course, the fact that the Li family's son was diligent in his studies was also a big part of the reason. At the age of 17, he was able to pass the elementary scholar examinations, which gave the Li family a lot of faith. If he was lucky enough to pass the imperial examinations in the future, he would be appointed as an official by the imperial court. When the villagers went out, they would be able to talk to others with their backs straight. However, this idea was completely shattered a few months ago. The child of the Li family, who was the hope of the entire village, had inexplicably gone mad. After he ran out of the village, he never came back. Even the government couldn't find him. The old man had originally planned to wait until the beginning of next year. If he had not returned by then, he would report his disappearance to the authorities and have his household register revoked. Who would have thought that when he reappeared in the village, he would suddenly transform into the county magistrate? The villagers of the Li family village, including the old man, were both surprised and delighted. The county magistrate, who was in charge of dozens of villages in Anxi County, came from their Li family village. With such a powerful backer, they would no longer have to worry about being bullied by other villages. If anything happened, they would also have someone in the county government who could speak up for them. Some of the villagers were already feeling elated. Watching the villagers chatter on for almost 2 hours, the scribe's legs had gone numb. However, when he saw that the county magistrate was still patiently listening to them, he could only groan in his heart. Li Yi listened patiently, but he felt a little strange. In the time travel novels he had read before, when someone traveled to ancient times, he would always have a headache and then he would get all the memories of the original owner of his body. Obviously, this law did not apply to him. Except for an inexplicable sense of familiarity with the Li family village and these villagers, Li Yi could not even remember their names. However, the people of this era were still very easy to fool. An excuse of amnesia could be a good excuse, which saved him a lot of trouble. Thinking of the situation when he woke up in that room, he didn't know what happened to the original owner of his body. When he woke up, he was inexplicably replaced by him. Thinking about it carefully, it was more likely that he had starved to death. After all, the disaster year had just passed, and the situation here was better than that of the Willow Leaf village. However, everyone must be living a hard life. Even if they were starving, a scholar who only knew how to read books would not take the initiative to ask for help. Boy, there was a drought last year and the land didn't produce much food. The tax. Seeming to think of something, the old man looked embarrassed and looked at him. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. The land of the Li family village all belonged to the state before. Every year at a fixed time the government would send people to collect taxes. However, the emperor was benevolent and sympathized with several prefectures that suffered from drought, so they were exempted from taxes for 2 years. Relying on the food stored at home, they could live a good life. But now that the emperor had given these lands to others, they didn't need to pay taxes to the government anymore. Naturally, the excuse of exemption from taxes was useless. Li Yi knew what the old man wanted to say. He said with a smile, "Thank you for taking care of me these years. I can't repay you. You don't need to mention the tax in the future." Hearing this, the scribe was stunned. County Magistrate Li didn't want to collect taxes? This was hundreds of acres of fertile land and the annual tax was not small. How could County Magistrate Li just say no to it? How can this be? Hearing this, the old man was also shocked. He just wanted Li Yi to be considerate of the disaster and reduce the tax or postpone the collection. He didn't expect that Li Yi would casually exempt the tax. In other words, all the output of the land would belong to the farmers in the future? Why not? If it weren't for the help of the villagers, there wouldn't be Li Yi today. Uncle Li, you don't need to say more. It's settled. Although 100 acres of land was not a small amount, the output of food was far less than that of the later generations. Relying on the business of Rui Du and spirits, the daily income was rolling in and the tax was not a big deal. Of course, the villagers of the Li family village were kind to the original owner of this body. If he hadn't grown up in the Li family village, he wouldn't have been so generous. Knowing that they didn't have to pay taxes in the future, the villagers of the Li family village were shocked, and then their expressions turned into ecstasy. If it weren't for Li Yi stopping them, they would have kowtowed to him. After coming out of the Li family village, Li Yi clearly felt relieved in his heart. Perhaps it was because of this body, even though his soul came from another spacetime and had nothing to do with this place, that inexplicable sense of familiarity and intimacy was unbreakable. As long as he could do something for these people within his capabilities, he would feel a little bit of comfort in his heart. Chapter 181. Your movements are so weak. Did you not eat enough? How many times have I told you that you have to show your imposing manner with this move? Where is your imposing manner? After another complete set of moves, Li Yi sat down on the chair and did not want to get up again. Lu Rui looked at him seriously with her hands behind her back. You have rested 3 times in 2 hours. Do you still want to be a martial arts master? Get up and continue. Let me rest a little more. Just a little more. Becoming a peerless master was not something that could be achieved overnight. Only 2 hours had passed and Li Yi was already lying on the chair, unwilling to even move a finger. Looking up, he saw Lu Rui looking down at him like a strict teacher. Li Yi sighed and said, "A girl who likes to smile will not have bad luck. Rui, you should smile more." Li Yi had a nagging feeling that Lu Rui had found the joy of being a master through him. She would not stop until she tortured him until he could not move. Although the effects were surprisingly good, to the point that one day was equivalent to several days before, with his combat strength steadily increasing, the process was just too torturous. It's fine if you don't want to practice. How about we have a spar and see how much you have improved these days? Lu Rui looked down at him and said lightly, I remember that I only told half of the story of the painted skin yesterday. How about we finish it now? Sparring with her was just giving her a chance to beat him up. Li Yi was not that stupid, so he said it out of desperation. Lu Rui felt it was a pity that she could not spar with Li Yi. However, she was actually more interested in the ghost stories he told. Leaning against the willow tree by the wall, she said, Go ahead. Xiao Huan was watching from the side. When she heard that the son-in-law was going to tell the story of the painted skin, she immediately hid far away and did not dare to come over. Listening to the ghost stories from the son-in-law yesterday, she was so scared that she could not sleep all night. Now she did not dare to listen anymore. Yesterday he had told Lu Rui the story of strange tales from a Chinese studio to prevent her from continuing to abuse him. Li Yi changed to a more comfortable position as the strange tales from a Chinese studio surfaced in his mind. After pondering for a moment, he slowly began speaking. When he entered the study, he found that the doors and windows were all closed. He tiptoed to the window and peeked through the crack. He was so scared that his hair stood on end. He saw a hideous evil ghost with a green face and teeth like saws. He was drawing on a piece of human skin on the bed with a colored pen. After drawing, he lifted the human skin and put it on his body like a piece of clothing. A gust of autumn wind blew, bringing with it a slight chill. Li Yi could not help but shiver. When he read the contents of the book, he would have a feeling that he was there, especially when he was describing the female ghost. In his mind, a vivid image had already appeared. The ferocious and terrifying evil ghost, with a green face and teeth like saws, laid on the bed with a piece of human skin, holding a colored pen and drawing on the human skin. Suddenly he felt a chill run down his spine and hurriedly sat up. Why did you stop? Lu Rui was listening with interest. Seeing that he suddenly stopped talking, she asked. I feel that if I want to become a martial arts master, I need to practice diligently. I can't slack off. Li Yi felt his body suddenly filled with strength. He looked up at her and said righteously, You must be more careful when you carry out your duties. The position of the county lieutenant is different from other jobs. Although you don't need to do it yourself, it is still somewhat dangerous. In the courtyard, Lu Rui helped Li Yi straighten the collar of the county lieutenant uniform and reminded him in a low voice. Although County Magistrate Lu generously gave him a month's vacation, he had to go to work eventually. If he delayed it any longer, the higher-ups would inevitably blame him. After a long period of special training from Lu Rui, the present Li Yi no longer looked like a scholar. Although he was still far from being strong and powerful, the azure-colored official robes he wore made him look valiant and valiant. Uncle Fong, I'll leave my husband to you in the future. After helping Li Yi straighten his clothes, she turned around and said to Fong. Fong was 1 generation older than Lu's sister Rui, but Li Yi got along with him more casually. One of them called him Fong, while the other called him Uncle Fong, which might sound strange to outsiders. Don't worry, eldest Mississippi. As long as I'm here, no one can touch the son-in-law. Fong patted his chest and promised. If he didn't go to Rui Square to keep watch, he would usually be idle at home. Now that the son-in-law was going to the Yamen and the manager of Rui Square was changed, he would continue to stay by Li Yi's side. In this regard, Fong was somewhat looking forward to it. He was very bored running back and forth between the stockade village and the shop every day. He had never been to the Yamen, but he thought that the life there should be much more interesting than now. Lu Rui was very confident in Fong's skills. With him by her side, as long as they didn't encounter a real master, they should have no problem dealing with ordinary thieves or even those so-called heroes of the underworld. I'm leaving. Li Yi waved at them and walked out of the courtyard. In the Anxi County Yamen, the spacious ceremonial door that only opened a few times a year opened. County Magistrate Lu, who hadn't been seen for a long time, walked out of the door under the escort of many Yamen runners and officials. County Lieutenant Li, I've been looking forward to seeing you, County Magistrate Lu said with a smile to the young man in the county lieutenant uniform who was walking towards him after walking out of the ceremonial door. Behind County Magistrate Lu, two men in the same official uniform looked confused. They couldn't figure out County Magistrate Lu's attitude towards the newly appointed county lieutenant. During the year, the ceremonial door of the county yamen was usually closed. An exception would be made when a new official arrived or when an official of the same or higher rank came to visit. County Magistrate Lu's action showed that he attached enough importance to County Lieutenant Li. Lord Lu, I'm sorry to keep you waiting for me. Li Yi also cupped his hands and said. County Magistrate Lu just smiled and didn't continue this topic. He turned around and pointed at the two men, introducing them. County Lieutenant Li, please allow me to introduce you to County Lieutenant Li. This is County Magistrate Wang, and this is Secretary Zheng. We'll be colleagues from now on. County Magistrate Wang and County Magistrate Lu were about the same age. With a big belly, he looked like a middle-aged plump man. Secretary Zheng looked a little older and had a skinny figure. When he stood beside County Magistrate Wang, he would be easily overlooked. County Magistrate Wang, Secretary Zheng. This is my first time here. Please take care of me in the future. Li Yi cupped his hands and said politely. We're all colleagues. We should take care of each other. Since County Magistrate Lu was so polite to County Lieutenant Li, the two second-in-command and third-in-command of the county yamen naturally didn't dare to put on airs. Before today they had also heard a couple of things about County Lieutenant Li. It was said that County Lieutenant Li was originally a scholar. Because of one of his essays, he was appointed by His Majesty and replaced the position of County Lieutenant Zhou and became the new County Lieutenant of Anxi. A few days ago he came to the county yamen once and resolutely solved two difficult cases, which made a group of yamen runners talk about it for several days. At that time the two just felt that County Lieutenant Li had some ability. They originally thought that he was just a scholar who was occasionally favored by the emperor. But seeing County Magistrate Lu's attitude today, it seemed that there was something about County Lieutenant Li that they didn't know. Chapter 182. Today was the first day that County Magistrate Li took office, so County Magistrate Lu naturally introduced the important officials in the county government to him. Li Yi greeted County Magistrate Wang and Secretary Zheng politely, so that they could be considered acquaintances. As for the other low-ranking officials, they had to take the initiative to greet him. After a solemn introduction, County Magistrate Lu took Li Yi to the office and the inner house. The inner house was located in the back hall of the county government, which was divided into several separate courtyards for the officials' family members to live in. However, in the entire county government only 4 people including Li Yi had this privilege. Before Li Yi came, County Magistrate Lu had already ordered people to clean it spotless. According to the regulations, officials could not live in the county government with their family members until they had been in office for 3 years. However, even without this regulation, Rui would not come here. Li Yi did not like the atmosphere in the county government, so he would rather go back to Rui Square than live here. 3 groups of yamen runners had already lined up neatly. The county magistrate was in charge of the public security of the county, and also the direct superior of these yamen runners. Among them, when the county magistrate tried a case, The officers who stood on both sides of the court to maintain discipline knew Li Yi. Thinking of the scene when County Magistrate Li tried a case in the court that day, they looked at him with admiration in their eyes. And among those constables, some of them had seen him before. No one had expected that this weak scholar, whom they had seen several times, would become their immediate superior in the blink of an eye. Although they did not witness it with their own eyes, they had heard from some people what happened when County Magistrate Li tried a case that day. At this time there were more doubts and curiosity in their eyes. However, in front of the County Magistrate Lu, they still had to show respect on their faces. As the head of a county, County Magistrate Lu was quite busy in daily affairs, so it was impossible for him to accompany Li Yi all the time. Therefore he roughly showed him the county government, and as for the more detailed things he gave them to a clever yamen runner. "Sir, do you want me to show you around the county office?" The bailiff looked at Li Yi with a hint of fanaticism in his eyes as he asked with a face full of smiles. Since he saw the means of County Magistrate Li that day, a door of a new world opened for him and he seemed to be enlightened. When he assisted the county magistrate in handling cases, he made great contributions again and again. Not only did he get several commendations from County Magistrate Lu, but he was also promoted to a small leader of the yamen runners. So far, the little yamen runner who was muddle-headed all day in the yamen had completely disappeared, replaced by a little yamen runner with feelings and ideals. "What's your name?" Li Yi asked casually. The bailiff seemed to be quite quick-witted. "Sir, this subordinate is Lu Yi," the bailiff hastily replied. "Lu Yi." Li Yi stared blankly for a moment. He thought that Lu Yi's father really knew how to name his son. He waved his hand and said, "There's no need to look around. Take me to the county lieutenant's office." "Lord, please." Lu Yi responded and led Li Yi through the ceremonial door to the side of the corridor. On both sides of the ceremonial door, there were small rooms, which were the offices of the officials other than the county magistrate. Lu Yi led Li Yi into one of the duty rooms. After walking through the door, he saw a pretty woman sitting on the main seat. The woman raised her head to look at Li Yi, put down the teacup in her hand and said, "I thought you wouldn't come. I'm just a commoner. How dare I defy the imperial edict?" Li Yi sat next to her, poured himself a cup of tea and said indifferently, "If it weren't for the princess constable, he would still be sunbathing in the courtyard of Willow Leaf Village or Rui Square." He got angry when he saw her, but he couldn't do anything, so he felt a little depressed. Seeing this scene, Lu Yi sensibly retreated. When the immortals fought, the mortals suffered. He couldn't get involved in the affairs of these two important people. Emingzu took a sip of tea and said lightly, "No matter how lazy you were before you took office, now that you're a county magistrate you can't be like before. Otherwise what? Are you going to dismiss me?" Li Yi turned to look at her and asked expectantly. "The position of county magistrate is very important. If you neglect your duties and cause public order to be unstable, and there are unjust and false cases, you'll be dismissed and investigated. If you're serious." Emingzu looked at him and waved her hand in the air. "Damn it, do you have to go so far?" Li Yi's eyelid twitched, but thinking about it, what she said made sense. A county magistrate was responsible for public order, arresting bandits and investigating cases. None of these were small matters. If you neglect your duties and cause public order to be unstable, bandits run amok, or randomly judge a case and cause someone to die unjustly, it wouldn't just be a case of neglecting your duties. Disregarding human life, just dismissing your duties might not be enough. The prison of Qingyan government welcomes you. Raising his head to look at Emingzu, his eyes were extremely complicated. He had thought that he had found a powerful backer, but who knew that this powerful backer dug a big hole for him to jump into? This kind of suffocating and depressing feeling, he couldn't understand it unless he experienced it himself. Speaking of which, this princess was really weird. She didn't want to stay in the imperial palace, nor did she want to be a noble, but came here to be a constable and suffer. She made life difficult for him. More importantly, the emperor actually agreed. Li Yi doubted whether this princess was his biological daughter. "Oh, in the month when you didn't take office, there were a lot of cases that need to be investigated as soon as possible." Emingzu put down the teacup and said, "Damn it." Li Yi already felt wronged. He had only been in the county government for a short while and he hadn't even sat down for a long time, but there were already a lot of trivial matters to deal with. He couldn't help but complain. Halfway through his words, he remembered that the person sitting opposite him was the princess. Wasn't scolding her mother equal to scolding the empress? Insulting the empress was a crime of great disrespect, and it was punishable by death. Seeing that Mingzhu's face became cold, Li Yi immediately put on a smile. Your Highness, how is your body? Is His Majesty's asthma better? According to what you said, I cleaned the palace several times a day and removed all the flowers and plants in the palace. The number of times my father's asthma has indeed decreased. A trace of softness appeared on Mingzhu's face as she said. Then she turned to look at Li Yi and said, I know you don't want to be an official. How about this? As long as you fulfill your duties as a county lieutenant within half a year, I can write to my father and allow you to resign after half a year. Is that true? Li Yi was stunned for a moment. Then he looked at her and his tone became more serious. Half a year's time was not short, but it was not long either. But there was still something to look forward to. Her words just now were like a ray of light in the darkness, guiding Li Yi in the right direction. Really? Mingzhu nodded. Half a year's time was the deadline that she and her father had agreed on. Half a year's time was enough to train him a little. Slap hands as a vow. Who knew if she was just saying it casually? If she went back on her word, there was no evidence. Who could he find to reason with? The ancient people believed in this. Slapping hands meant that the vow was made. If he went back on his word, he would suffer the wrath of the heavens. Mingzhu glanced at him, but in the end she still reached out her hand to touch his. But Li Yi took 2 steps back from her slap. His palm was slightly numb. He was extremely suspicious that she had used qi just now. Alright, the vow has been made. Can we go and work on the case? Mingzhu stood up, looked at him and walked out of the door. Wait a minute. Before she walked out of the door, Li Yi's voice came from behind. Is there anything else? She turned to look at him. Why don't you write a written pledge? Li Yi looked at her with a hesitant expression. If she didn't believe in ghosts and gods, it would be the same whether she made a vow or not. It was better to write a written pledge. With a written pledge, there would be material evidence, and he wouldn't have to worry about her going back on her word. Chapter 183. Under Li Yi's strong request, Mingzhu reluctantly wrote down the contract. The content of the contract was just like what she said just now. The contract would last for half a year. If Li Yi didn't neglect his duties and did what a county lieutenant was supposed to do, she would personally write a letter to allow him to resign after half a year. This condition was very lenient. Li Yi felt that he wouldn't do any worse than the previous county lieutenant Zhou. After half a year he would be a good man again. With the receipt personally signed by the princess in his bosom, he immediately felt much more at ease. His dejection was swept away and he was in high spirits. In an instant, the elegant scholar turned into a dignified and handsome county magistrate. Lu Rui's training over the past few days had been very effective. At the very least, when he was serious, he looked like a completely different person. Seeing the sudden change in him, Li Mingzhu's eyes flashed with a strange light, and then she found it a little funny. What made him change so much was not a reward, but actually allowing him to resign from his position. It was the first time that she saw such a strange official. Autumn was actually the season to collect land rent. However, the benevolent emperor exempted Qing and prefecture and the neighboring prefectures from taxes for 2 years. There was no need to collect taxes during Li Yi's term of office. As for arresting thieves and trying cases, it wasn't that complicated. If anyone lost something, they would come to the yamen to file a case. The constables would symbolically investigate and find clues. Then they would find the thieves and everyone would be happy. However, most cases couldn't be solved. After a long time they would be left unsolved. The rate of solving cases was actually very low. In this aspect there was no difference from the future. Unless it was a major case or a lawsuit that involved human life, it had to be treated seriously. However, if such a case really happened, the most anxious person should be County Magistrate Lu. As a county lieutenant, he only assisted the county magistrate in investigating the case, so he didn't make Li Yi worry too much. Fortunately, there weren't many cases like this and there were only a few of them in a year. Most of the cases that needed to be dealt with were small cases such as fighting, theft, and robbery. Li Yi had already learned about these things from Lu Yi. Generally speaking, the county lieutenant's daily life was relatively leisurely. It wasn't as hard as he imagined. Just like the former county lieutenant Zhou, he usually stayed in the county government office. Things like patrolling the streets and maintaining public order were naturally done by his subordinates. He was basically a hands-off boss, and the busiest time was when he used public office for personal gain. When he spoke just now, he placed his hand on his chest. This is a very focused action, which means that what he said is very likely to be the truth. In the county jail, a man who was accused of theft was brought in. After a few questions, Li Yi explained to Mingzu, "Your Excellency, I really didn't steal anything." He didn't think that this unfamiliar lord would be willing to believe him. When the man heard this, he was startled for a moment before saying with tears and mucus flowing down his face, "Of course, this is not absolute. It's just a possibility. But at least it can clear him of some suspicion and focus more attention elsewhere." As for the suspect just now, his answer seemed to be flawless, but when he was asked to tell the situation backward, he made a lot of mistakes, which means that he didn't do it at all. It's more likely that he was lying. Similarly, this can only be used as a reference and specific evidence is still needed. Mingzi looked at the scribe next to her, who was writing at a fast speed and recording down every word that Li Yi had said just now. Although she hadn't figured out the basis of Li Yi's theory for the time being, it was undoubtedly correct. Just now, several suspects were baffled by his interlocking questions. In the end, they contradicted themselves and gave themselves away in their words, so they had no choice but to confess. This was obviously a gentler and more effective interrogation method. If it could be summarized into a book and implemented by the Ministry of Justice and all the government offices, it could greatly improve the efficiency of the trial, reduce the use of torture tools and benefit the people. It would be a great contribution. She had already asked someone to record what Li Yi had said in the court last time. During this period of time she had tested it on many people. Although it didn't match every time, it was proven in most cases. "Did you think of all these things yourself?" Mingzi looked at him, her beautiful eyes full of doubt. This magical method of distinguishing lies required a lot of experience and meticulous observation. If it was suggested by an experienced official, it would be barely acceptable, but with his age and experience, this matter was really suspicious. "This matter, I have to start from a winter many years ago." Li Yi's face revealed a look of reminiscence. "Later, when he left to thank me for saving his life, the old man gave me an ancient book which was written in the book." Li Yi used the name of the nameless old man again. "Where's the book?" Mingzu asked. "I lost it." Li Yi replied without a blush or gasping for breath. Mingzi knew that she couldn't get any truth from him today, but it didn't matter. There was still half a year, enough for her to dig out more useful things from him. When he left the county jail, he saw Lu Yixue still wandering in front of the duty room. Li Yi waved his hand and signaled him to come over. "Your Excellency, what's the matter?" Lu Yixue asked with a face full of smiles. "Go and get a map of the prefecture city." On the first day of County Magistrate Li's office, all the yamen runners were gathered together. Arrestor Li had just announced that from that day on, they had to learn something every day. Every once in a while there would be an assessment. Those who failed the assessment 3 times could pack up and go home. Although these yamen runners were also lowly people because they worked in the yamen, they usually had to bow and scrape to the officials. In front of the ordinary people, they could be regarded as half an official. No one wanted to lose this ancestral rice bowl. In addition, County Magistrate Li also set some new rules. When they went out to patrol the streets, they would no longer wander aimlessly. County Magistrate Li divided the prefecture city into small areas, and each of them had their own jurisdiction. They only needed to be responsible for the security of their respective areas. This seemed to be a little easier, but everyone knew in their hearts that although they had a clearer division of labor, their responsibilities were also clearer. They could no longer have the thought of idling around in the yamen by doing errands in the yamen. Some people were happy while some were worried. Lu Yixue, who had been promoted by County Magistrate Lu to be the monitor, was one of the happy ones. After knowing that what they were going to learn was what County Magistrate Li showed in the court that day, which was a method to distinguish lies and make suspects confess without torture, they even faintly looked forward to the training class that County Magistrate Li mentioned. Chapter 184. At the behest of County Magistrate Li, a free training class for the constables and yamen runners was officially held. Of course, County Magistrate Li was busy with official business and had no time to teach them personally. A literate scribe in the yamen was the teacher for the time being. He held a booklet with County Magistrate Li's quotations and analyzed the specific cases one by one. The scribe had witnessed how County Magistrate Li tried cases with his own eyes, so he was very familiar with the process. At first, the yamen runners just wanted to pass the test and keep their jobs. After listening for a while, they forgot about these things and showed an interested expression. Only then did they know that what the scribe taught them was the magical interrogation method of County Magistrate Li. As an ordinary yamen runner, if he learned this, he would undoubtedly have a special skill and would be valued wherever he went. Just like Lu Yixue, no matter how fierce and tough the criminal was, he could only obediently sign in his hands. During this period of time, he had made many outstanding achievements and had become the right-hand man of County Magistrate Lu. Half a month ago he was just an ordinary yamen runner like them, but now he had become a monitor, which was envied by everyone. Of course, they didn't have Lu Yixue's talent, so they could only make up for it with hard work. It was impossible for them to become a monitor. It was their short-term goal to be valued by County Magistrate Li or County Magistrate Lu. The training class before him was undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Danny, tell me honestly, did you go to the brothel again last night? During the break, a skinny yamen runner suddenly turned his head and asked another yamen runner. Nonsense, I went home directly after leaving the yamen office yesterday. The yamen runner called Danny was stunned for a while, then his face turned red and he said with a flushed face. You still dare to say no? You stuttered and didn't dare to look at me. The county magistrate said that you were lying. Since we are all men, we won't laugh at you. I just want to see if the method taught by the county magistrate is effective. The yamen runner had already understood the situation when he saw the yamen runner's expression, so he laughed and said, I didn't go. The yamen runner called Dainu controlled his emotions and said calmly. He thought to himself, why did County Magistrate Li teach us these things? What secrets would we have in front of them in the future? Even if you don't tell us, we know. Another bailiff smiled mysteriously and said, the packet of aphrodisiac you secretly hid is gone. You must have gone to a brothel. There's no need to be so complicated. Look at how listless he is today. Where else could he have gone last night? Another bailiff jeered. Daigneau's face turned as red as a monkey's butt. What was there to laugh about visiting a brothel? He spoke as if they had never visited one before. When he saw the scribe pick up the booklet again, he quickly changed the topic and said, it's about to begin. Listen carefully to Scribe Chen. If you miss out on anything and fail the test, be careful that you won't be able to keep your jobs. These words were quite a deterrent to the bailiffs. They stopped teasing Daigneau and immediately straightened their attitude and listened attentively. Li Yi was very satisfied with the yamen runner's humble and eager attitude. In the future, the employees of big or small companies would go through pre-job training before they officially started work. Although these bailiffs were old foxes in the yamen, they were good at doing odd jobs and running errands. As an honorable people's yamen runner, their professional knowledge was far from enough. He didn't want to know how County Magistrate Zhou managed his subordinates in the past. At least in his place, he still attached great importance to the training of his employees. The key was, the more capable and the higher their execution, the fewer things that needed to be handled by Li Yi personally. In order to be a stable boss in the office, Li Yi was not stingy at all. He copied all the FBI's methods of investigating cases and detecting lies. These books were already common in the future. He picked out some useful ones. As for how effective they were, it would depend on their talents. After they had more or less mastered these things, it was time to bring out books like Criminal Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, Young Justice, Bao Shigong's Strange Case, and so on for them to broaden their horizons. The yamen runners in ancient times were actually not as high and mighty as people imagined. They were the same as prostitutes and actors. These yamen runners were usually hereditary. Their ancestors were all in this line of work. As long as they didn't lose an arm or a leg, they didn't need to be examined before they took up the post. When the father retired, the son could take over. With this kind of selection method, these yamen runners naturally didn't have any ability to speak of. The way they spent their days in the yamen was not what Li Yi wanted. He didn't need to train them into independent detectives. At the very least, they should have some basic qualities and be able to handle some small disputes. Li Yi was already very pleased that they didn't have to bother him with trivial matters. Through these 2 days of observation of the Yamen runners, Li Yi discovered that the monitor named Lu Yi had some talent. When it came to interrogation by torture, he could often understand it with just a hint. He could be trained to be his right-hand man or something. It should save him a lot of trouble in the future. After pondering for 2 days, he set these rules for these Yamen runners. At the end of the day, he just wanted to be a lazy county officer. He divided the responsibilities bit by bit according to the small areas. In the future, there were area policemen, and now there were area detectives. If there was any small dispute in the area, they would first try to solve it themselves. If they couldn't solve it, there would be a small captain in every 5 areas. If the small captain couldn't solve it, they could report it to the chief captain, Lu Yi, to deal with it. If even Lu Yi couldn't do anything, then Li Yi or Emingzu could only do it personally. Although Emingzu knew that Li Yi did this to be lazy, it seemed to be reasonable after thinking about it carefully. She believed that Li Yi didn't do it on a whim. It would be better to observe for a period of time before making a decision. Now, Li Yi could barely understand County Magistrate Lu's mood. With such a princess as his subordinate, he couldn't beat or scold her, and he had to consider the opinion of his subordinate when he did things. Such an official was really aggrieving. After reading a few books in the duty room, he estimated that it was almost time to get off work. He planned to call Fong back. The moment he walked out of the door, he saw 2 Yamen runners escorting a man in. Li Yi originally planned to leave directly. When he saw the appearance of the man, he was slightly stunned and walked over there. County officer. Seeing him coming, the 2 Yamen runners hurriedly saluted. The man raised his head and saw the young man in official uniform walking over. He was also stunned for a moment, and then a trace of joy appeared on his face. Chapter 185. What's going on? Li Yi walked in front of the 2 bailiffs and pointed at the man. One of the runners was stunned for a moment, and then immediately said, "Your Excellency, this man hurt people maliciously. We caught him on the street and are about to take him to the county jail." Benefactor. At this time the man also reacted. He looked at Li Yi and said with surprise. When the 2 runners saw this scene, they were immediately puzzled. Could it be that he knew the county lieutenant? It's just a small matter. Don't mention the word benefactor anymore. Li Yi waved his hand to the man and then asked the 2 runners, "Tell me the details. What's going on?" The burly man in front of him was the man he met the last time on the street when he solved the silver theft case. That day he was stolen by the middle-aged scholar, and the 2 of them were arguing endlessly over the ownership of the silver. In order to get away from Li Mingzhu, Li Yi made a bet with him on this matter and unintentionally helped him. At this moment he still had an impression of him. The man was very filial to his mother and didn't seem to be a criminal. It was not easy to stay in the county jail. Even if he was not tortured, it would be uncomfortable to stay there for a few days. If it was not a big deal, it would be okay to let him go. Seeing that the county magistrate was interested in the case, the Yamen runner immediately told him everything he knew. Only then did Li Yi know that the reason why the man was arrested was that he had hurt a shop assistant in the medicine shop. It was said that the shop assistant was greedy for a small profit and sold moldy medicinal herbs to the man. The man's mother was seriously ill, and after drinking the medicine she almost died. It was with great difficulty that she managed to keep her life. After learning the truth from the doctor, the man was immediately angry. He rushed into the medicine shop and beat the shop assistant half to death. 2 passing runners happened to see him and arrested him. Although the shop assistant was wrong, it did not cause any serious trouble. Instead, the man beat him half to death and deliberately hurt him, so he was taken back to the government on the spot. "What's your name?" Li Yi asked the man. "Sir, I am Wu Er." The burly man originally wanted to call him benefactor, but when he thought of what Li Yi had just said, he immediately changed the way he addressed him and imitated the 2 bailiffs. Li Yi turned his head to look at the 2 bailiffs and asked, "Is that fellow's injury serious?" One of the runners shook his head and said, "Even though his face is bruised and swollen, making him look terrifying, there's no danger to his life. He'll be fine after a few days of rest." Li Yi nodded his head and said, "Take him back to prison, and every day he will have to be fed 2 meals in prison. This Wu heir is worried about his mother, and his filial piety is commendable. It is understandable that he acted on impulse. If there is nothing serious with the shop assistant, then let him go." The 2 bailiffs were stunned for a moment, then they immediately nodded. "Sir's right." The 2 let go of the man. Seeing that he was still standing there in a daze, one of them slapped his head and said, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and thank the county lieutenant." The burly man came back to his senses and a trace of joy appeared on his face. He immediately knelt down and said in a loud voice, "Thank you, county lieutenant. Thank you, county lieutenant." It was unknown where these people learned to kneel when they saw an official. Li Yi wanted to help him up, but the man's strength was not small. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and steadily kowtowed twice. All right, stop kowtowing. This time it was because of your filial piety. In the future, think more before you act. If you have any problems, you can come to the government for help. Don't be so impulsive." Li Yi waved his hand and said. The burly man laughed and thanked him several times. Worried that no one would take care of his mother, he hurriedly left. "Sir is so benevolent. I admire you." Ignoring the flattery of the 2 bailiffs, Li Yi waved his hand casually, called Fong from the back hall and walked out of the county government. In this era, the working hours of officials were very different from those of the future. Because the main officials such as the county magistrate and the county magistrate lived in the government, they had to go to work at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. But they also got off work early. They could go home at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. According to the unified rules, except for some important festivals, the officials had a rule of 1 day off every 5 days. That was to say, every 5 days they worked, they could have a day off to go home and take a bath. It was quite scientific. However, Li Yi was a special case in the county government. Perhaps Zhu found her conscience and wanted to make up for what she owed him, so she relaxed many rigid rules for him. He didn't have to live in the county government and he didn't have to go to work early in the morning. He was much freer than the county magistrate. Li Xian kept his word. Last time he promised to give Li Yi a good horse, and Li Yi had received it a few days ago. Unfortunately, he hadn't learned how to ride a horse. The horse was temporarily requisitioned by Lu Rui. She seemed to like the horse very much. Since she requisitioned it, she didn't mention returning it. It was not only Li Yi's dream to ride a horse in fine clothes and travel the world with a sword. During this time he had a lot of contact with Lu Rui. She liked the martial arts novels told by Li Yi the most. Every time Li Yi talked about those martial arts heroines, her eyes would shine. As his sister-in-law and martial arts coach, she had said that she would teach Li Yi how to ride a horse, and Li Yi had been looking forward to it for several days. He imagined that it must be very cool to ride a horse on the road in fine clothes. If he had a long sword like Lu Rui's, he might really look like a hero. Li Yi did not really like the saber that was given to him by his superiors. There was a saying that the sword was the leader of all weapons. In his impression, heroes usually used swords. When he thought of sabers, the first image that popped up in his mind should be a group of rugged men, each holding a large saber in their hands, rushing down the mountain shouting, "This mountain is mine, this tree is planted by me," and so on. The feeling of incongruity was too strong. If there was a chance in the future, he would change to a sword. He always thought that Lu Rui looked very cool when she used a sword. Her expression was cold and her sword was silent. If he was in Jianghu in the future, he could give himself a nickname of Deadly Fairy, which would probably shock a lot of people. Thinking about it carefully, the Princess Arrestor looked quite cool in her uniform with a knife on her waist. However, no one had ever seen her draw her knife. But thinking about the way she slashed around with her knife, no matter how cool she looked, it was all gone. After bargaining with Zhu, Li Yi's life did not change much after he became the county lieutenant. He came down from Willow Village in the morning and went back in the afternoon. The only difference was that the place he stayed in during the day had changed from Rui Square to the county government office. It had just entered winter and it had not snowed yet, but the weather was already a little cold. When he went out in the morning, he told Xiao Huan to wait for him to come back in the afternoon for hot pot. At this time they were probably already preparing. After walking into the village, Fong went back directly when he passed by the gate of his house. Li Yi continued to walk for a while. When he just stepped into the yard, he saw Sister Rui and Xiao Huan in the yard. Besides them, there was also a strange woman in the yard. The woman looked to be in her 30s or 40s. She wore colorful clothes and looked quite festive. At this time she was saying something with a smile on her face. Seeing Xiao Huan running towards him, Li Yi looked at the woman with some doubts and asked, "Who is she?" The little maid showed a bitter expression and said in a low voice, "She is the official matchmaker. This time she came to urge second miss to get married quickly. This year she has been here several times." Chapter 186. Official Matchmaker? Li Yi was slightly taken aback by Xiao Huan's words. Previously he had mistaken 10,000 gold as 10,000 taels of gold, which was extremely embarrassing. In order not to make such a low-level mistake again, he took some time to study the common sense of this world. Of course, this included etiquette, customs and customs. Official matchmakers were also matchmakers, but they had an additional official identity compared to ordinary matchmakers. At this time, although there was no birth control, the population was still very small. Medical standards were still limited and the average lifespan of people was not long. It was considered lucky to live to 50 years old. Every additional day of life was a blessing from God. If the population base could not be increased, it would lead to many problems. Without a population, where could the country find people to farm? How could the country collect taxes? If there was a war, where could they find people to join the army? How could they resist the foreign enemies? How could they maintain the prosperity of the nation? Therefore, every king regarded increasing the population as the top priority of the country's development. Since a few hundred years ago, early marriage and early childbearing had become a law and regulation that encouraged more children. Those who had more children would be rewarded, and those who had fewer children would be punished. There was even a law that a girl's entire family would be imprisoned if she did not get married before the age of 15. Although the marriage laws of the Jing kingdom were not so harsh, under the encouragement of the government, everyone was working hard to get married and have children. You're a 17 or 18-year-old girl who's still waiting to get married. Isn't this dragging the country down? Therefore, in addition to ordinary matchmakers, the profession of official matchmaker was also born. Any profession, as long as it was related to the word official, was not that simple. The official matchmaker's responsibility was to respond to the call of the country to solve the lifelong problems of unmarried men and women of the right age. If the other party did not agree, they could even force them to be matched. Based on the concept of, if you don't want to get married, I'll help you, these official matchmakers traveled from village to village. When necessary, they could also force two single dogs of the right age to be together. Every time they did something good, not only would they receive a gift from the man's family, the government would also give them a certain reward. This greatly increased their enthusiasm. Lu Rui was 16 years old. In the future, she was still a young girl in her prime. However, in the current era, she was undoubtedly an old lady. This kind of old lady was naturally the focus of the official media. "Miss, it's not that I want to scold you, but you're not young anymore. How many women your age have children that can call mother? Look at you, how many times have I come to your house? How many marriages have I talked about? Why don't you get it?" In the courtyard, the official matchmaker with a mole on the corner of her mouth was still talking incessantly. Lu Rui had a helpless look on her face. Lu Rui's gaze was fixed in front of her. Her eyes were wandering, and it was obvious that she was distracted. The official matchmaker's mouth did not stop. Suddenly he asked curiously, "I remember that when I came last time, your sister wasn't married either. It's only been a few months. How did she get married? I wonder which matchmaker arranged it. Why didn't she register it with the authorities?" Her tone was a little regretful. She was responsible for the marriages of men and women of the right age in Willow Leaf Village and the nearby villages. If she could arrange a marriage, she would inevitably be rewarded. If someone else took it away, she would have nothing to do with it. If she knew which matchmaker was so unruly, she would definitely teach her a lesson next time. In this line of work, one must abide by the rules of this line of work. She could not stretch her hand too far. Lu Rui did not speak. The reason why she made that decision some time ago was not only because of Second Aunt and the others, but also because the official matchmaker had come to her house countless times. If it was delayed for a while, she was afraid that she would be fined. At that time they did not have any extra food at home. The official matchmaker looked at Lu Rui and said, "Miss, I didn't mistreat you at all. Miss, you are so beautiful and I can't bear to say bad things about a bad family. Last time you were not satisfied with blacksmith Wang's eldest son, so this time I left the best for you. Although Master Su's son is a little silly, he has a cloth shop in the prefecture city. He has maids and servants and a big house. He doesn't lack anything. If you marry him, you will be the mistress of the Su family. What do you think? If you agree, I'll immediately reply to Master Su's letter, and the marriage can be settled within these 2 days. If it drags on for too long and Master Su agrees to someone else, then there's nothing we can do." There's a large group of people squeezing into the Su family's door. There was still no change in Lu Rui's expression, as if she did not hear the official matchmaker's words. "Miss, I can't help you delay this marriage any longer. If you still don't agree, I'm afraid the higher-ups will send people to punish you soon." The official matchmaker tried to persuade her. Li found it a little funny when he heard this. Maids, servants, and a big house. Tempting Fong with such conditions might work, but Mississippi Lu was someone who had seen the world now. The money she had saved up was probably enough to empty out the cloth shop. The official matchmaker was originally confident about today's marriage. She knew the situation of the young lady's family. A few months ago they were so poor that they could barely eat. Although the Su family was not a wealthy family, and it was an exaggeration to say that she would marry them and become the mistress of the Su family, at least she would not have to worry about food and clothing. Wouldn't it be 1,000 times better than here? As she thought about this, her gaze swept across the two sisters. Suddenly, her expression froze, and then astonishment appeared on her face. The last time she came, they were dressed in ordinary clothes. Today, these 2 sets of clothes were probably worth a lot of money. Looking at the hairpin in the elder sister's hair, she felt that it was vaguely familiar. After thinking for a while, she remembered that she had seen it at the most famous silver shop in the prefecture, Golden Jade Lane. It was worth at least a few dozen taels of silver. After so many years of hardship, of course, Lu Rui would not be so extravagant as to spend a few dozen taels of silver to buy a golden hairpin. This hairpin was given to her by Li Yi some time ago. However, she did not know that the official matchmaker was also puzzled. It had only been a few months since they last saw each other. Could it be that the two sisters had made a fortune? However, even if they had really become wealthy, they still had to get married. If it was delayed any longer, it would not be as simple as the punishment of rations. Li Yi was standing nearby watching the bustle. The courtyard door was suddenly pushed open. Fong had just walked in and saw Li Yi. He rubbed his head and said embarrassedly, "Sonny, the cloth that you gave to my family last time, do you still have it? Zhuzi was playing with fire at home today and accidentally burned the cloth. I gave him a beating." Li Yi did not wait for him to finish and ordered the little servant girl, "Go to the room and bring another roll of cloth out." Fong was considered a wealthy person now and could afford a roll of cloth. But the significance of the cloth given by the emperor was different. If it was burned by Zhuzi just like that, he would probably be heartbroken. Li Yi silently mourned for the naughty brats, but for a while. Xiao Huan nodded her head and ran briskly into the room. After a while she came out carrying a roll of cloth. The last time the emperor rewarded them with too much cloth. They had given out a lot and there was still a large pile left. It would not hurt to give a few more rolls to the little servant girl. The official matchmaker watched as the little servant girl with a silver hairpin ran past him. When his gaze swept to the silk cloth in her arms, a trace of surprise appeared on his face again. This is good material. Chapter 187. The official matchmaker was also a matchmaker. Although a matchmaker only relied on her mouth to turn white into black, she spent her days running around and building bridges. Naturally, she was more knowledgeable. She did not train her eyes for nothing. Even without personally touching the cloth in the servant girl's hands, she could tell that the material was not ordinary. In Qing, an prefectural city, this kind of cloth could only be found in the top-notch cloth shops. She felt very strange in her heart. What exactly had happened to these two sisters in the past few months? The last time she came, their family's situation was still very difficult. Not long after, even the little servant girl was dressed in silk and satin. The price of the silver hairpin in her hair was probably more than her annual salary. In this way, even the servant girl in their family was treated like a young mistress. It was normal for them to look down on Master Su's family. However, seeing that it was almost the end of the year, she still needed to matchmake a few more couples to reach the required number. She raised her head to look at Lu Rui and said, "Miss, you can't ask for too much. Marriage is about matching families. We can't reach a higher level. If you still don't understand, the next time you come it won't be me." The official matchmaker's words were vague, but Lu's sister Rui understood. The next time it wasn't her, it would be the officials. If it was a few months ago, even they would have a headache over such a matter. But now this kind of threat had no effect. Lu Rui saw Li Yi walking over and greeted him. "Hubby, you're back." The official matchmaker also turned his head and saw the handsome young man walking over. Hearing Lu Rui's greeting, he immediately understood that this must be the woman's husband. Looking at the situation, he must be marrying into the family. This young man was handsome. It would be a pity if he married into the family. How much betrothal gift is the Su family willing to offer? Li Yi turned his head to look at the official matchmaker and asked with a smile. Hearing this, Lu Rui's expression changed. A dangerous light flashed in her eyes as she looked at Li Yi. "Husband." Lu Rui tugged at his sleeve and shook her head. She and Lu Rui had depended on each other since they were young and had a deep sisterly bond. To her, she naturally did not want Rui to marry someone she did not like. The official matchmaker was stunned. Judging from the scholar's attitude, there seemed to be room for negotiation. A hint of joy appeared on his face as he said, "You can rest assured. Master Su's family is rich. I believe the betrothal gifts will definitely satisfy you. If the Su family is willing to pay 10,000 gold taels as a betrothal gift, this matter is not impossible to discuss." Li Yi was still brooding over the previous matter. What? The official media couldn't believe his ears and repeated, 10,000 taels of gold. Seeing Li Yi nod his head, the official media was stunned on the spot, looking at him with a strange expression. 10,000 taels of gold? Did she know how much money that was? Even an emperor marrying a princess would not need so much as a betrothal gift, right? She had originally thought that such a small family would not be able to see much. Even if the betrothal gift was a bit too much, she could go back and discuss it with Master Su. It was not impossible. But 10,000 taels of gold. Even if the Su family sold themselves 10 times over, they would not be able to gather that much. Hearing Li Yi's words, Lu Rui's pretty face was also a bit stunned. She knew that he was probably just messing around, so she smiled and did not say anything else. Lu Rui glanced at him and the coldness on her face disappeared. "Ah, young master, please don't joke around. 10,000 taels of gold. Who in the entire Qing and prefecture would be able to take out such an expensive betrothal gift?" The official agent's mouth twitched as he spoke with a fake smile. 10,000 taels of gold was a huge sum of money to anyone. Perhaps there were many people in the Qing and prefecture who could take out this much money, but only a fool would use 10,000 taels of gold as a betrothal gift. "Then I can only apologize," Li Yi said regretfully. "I hope this official matchmaker can make things convenient for me. You don't have to worry about my wife's sister's marriage in the future." Although his sister-in-law's temper was not very good, she was beautiful and skilled in martial arts. If she could not be sold for a good price, wouldn't it be a great loss? "I'm afraid that won't do. Scholar, you are taking things for granted." The official matchmaker sneered, thinking that this young scholar looked arrogant. Women of the right age had to marry. This was a rule since ancient times. She was only an official matchmaker and did not have such great power. She said in a strange tone, "Men and women should get married when they are of age. This lady is not young anymore. It is the right thing to do to get married as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will not be good when the higher-ups punish you. How dare you speak to the county lieutenant like this?" Old Fong took the piece of cloth from Xiao Huan and was about to leave when he heard the strange voice of the official media. His brows involuntarily sank as he strode over and said. He had been with Li Yi for the past 2 days and stayed in the yamen. Most of the people he came into contact with were the yamen runners and he had learned some things from them. Although this was not the yamen, this woman dared to laugh at the son-in-law. If the yamen runners were here, they would not let it go so easily. The official matchmaker was still sneering in her heart when she was suddenly startled by a big man who walked over and scolded her. When she came to her senses and was about to scold him, she suddenly remembered that he had just said, "County Lieutenant." He was shocked again. She had long heard that the previous County Lieutenant Zhou had been removed from office and a new County Lieutenant had come to the Yamen, but she had never seen him before. Could it be this young man in front of her? Although she still had some doubts in her heart, she thought that no one would dare to fake this kind of thing. She looked at Li Yi with a slightly respectful expression and asked, You are the County Lieutenant?" Li Yi took out the County Lieutenant's waist token and waved it in front of her. "Ah, it's all my fault for offending you just now. Please forgive me, Your Excellency." Seeing the waist token, the official matchmaker had no doubts in her heart and immediately said with a panicked expression. Before Li Yi spoke, she said again, "Don't worry, Your Excellency. This girl's marriage will be decided by herself. There will be no official matchmaker in the future, and the higher-ups will not send anyone to urge her." Thinking of what she had just said to the county lieutenant, the official matchmaker wanted to slap herself a few times. At this moment she hurriedly said to make up for it. Although she did not have such power as an official matchmaker, as long as she revealed a little of the county lieutenant's intention, those people would definitely not dare to make things difficult for the county lieutenant's family. At this moment, Li Yi felt that it was not bad to have the identity of a county lieutenant. At least it would make many things more convenient. He waved his hand to the official matchmaker and said, "You just said that after getting married, where should we go to register?" "Don't worry, Your Excellency. After going back, I will take care of this matter properly," the official matchmaker said very sensibly. Who would have thought that this sister would be so lucky to have a relationship with the county lieutenant? If she had known earlier, she would not have dared to put on such an attitude just now. After being reminded by the official matchmaker just now, Li Yi realized that marriage also needed to be registered in this era. After thinking about it carefully, he realized that he and Rui had actually been an illegal couple for so long. Lu Rui's gaze froze when she saw him calmly talking to the official matchmaker about this matter, and the expression on her pretty face became slightly absent-minded. After registering with the government, they would be a real couple. Registering with the government required the birth date and horoscope. Li Yi converted it according to his birthday in his previous life. When he turned around, he saw Rui standing there in a daze. He stretched out his hand and waved it in front of her eyes. He asked doubtfully, "Rui, why are you in a daze?" "He's asking for your birth date and horoscope." Chapter 188. After seeing his waist token, the official media's attitude immediately took a 180-degree turn. He spoke politely and respectfully, and the wrinkles at the corner of his eyes could even blossom. Li Yi finally understood why the scholars in ancient times had sharpened their brains to drill into the officialdom. Realizing their life ambitions and serving the country were all said for others to hear. Of course, there was no lack of people who were really loyal to the emperor and loved their country, but most of them only cared about the limitless glory and the power in their hands after becoming an official. After all, even a small county lieutenant of the 8th rank could not be underestimated in a district or a county. No wonder so many people flocked to the imperial examinations every year. If they were lucky and could get an official position, they could bring honor to their ancestors and reach the pinnacle of life. If it wasn't for the fact that he had lived 2 lives and was used to being lazy, not wanting to be restrained by the rules and regulations of the officialdom, and not having much pursuit for these things, he might not be able to resist the temptation of being called county lieutenant by so many people for a long time. After the official media finished asking what he needed to ask, he immediately took his leave. He was afraid that everything would be settled by the next morning. Before she came, Xiao Huan had already prepared the charcoal stove. After such a long delay, the stove fire had long been extinguished, so she hurriedly went to light the fire. As usual, the mutton was cut by Lu Rui. The knife in her hand danced up and down at an extremely fast speed. Li Yi could not see her movements clearly, but the mutton she cut was as thin as a cicada's wing. The knife skills were exquisite, which made him extremely envious. After washing the vegetables with Lu Rui outside, the stove fire was also blazing. They first put some in the pot and the whole family waited patiently around the stove. Li Yi would teach Xiao Huan a new dish every few days. Most of the time Lu Rui would also follow along and learn. Now was not like a few months ago. Every meal was porridge and white flour. Even on normal days the meals were exceptionally sumptuous. but to say the most popular was still the hot pot. Whether it was the ancients or the modern people, this thing had a mysterious charm, especially in the cold season. It was even more comfortable to eat. After a few days when it was snowing and freezing outside, the whole family would gather around the stove to eat hot pot. That was the true enjoyment. Old Fong became addicted to it after freeloading for a meal. He made a mandarin duck pot from a blacksmith in the prefectural city, took it home and poured all the meat, vegetables, seasonings, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar and so on into it. Halfway through, Zhu couldn't help but vomit after taking the first bite. "Little brat, how long has it been and your mouth has become so picky?" Fong frowned and kicked the brat's butt. He picked up the chopsticks and scooped a mouthful of bloody mutton from the pot, chewed it a few times and vomited it without swallowing it. Later he realized that there might be some tricks in this thing that he hadn't figured out, and he couldn't bring himself to do it, so he sent his wife to ask Xiao Huan. Before he left, he brought back some of Li Yi's homemade hot pot base. Since then, Fong's internal heat hadn't gotten better, and he always had the smell of mutton on him. Every day he followed Li Yi back and forth between the prefectural city and the stockade village, and Li Yi usually kept a sufficient distance from him. Today when they were eating hot pot, Lu Rui didn't fight with him, which was rare. Li Yi thought that she had finally listened to the etiquette of hot pot that he had painstakingly taught her, and he was very pleased. In the days when he first came to this world, the biggest problem he faced was how to fill his stomach. It wasn't enough to fill his stomach, and he also needed to solve the problem of feeding his family. At that time, what Li Yi hoped for was just to eat a few more grains of rice in the porridge he ate every day, and to have more oil and vegetables in his plain noodles, and he would be satisfied. When he first came to this world, he had an inexplicable repulsion and fear towards this world. He wanted to live a comfortable life without starving, and it wasn't in vain that God had given him a second chance in life. Although there was a small problem with the initial setting, such as the location and the era, and the poor family situation, fortunately the gender didn't change. These days, although there were many twists and turns, everything was still smooth. Later, the problem of feeding his family was solved, and he had to solve more people's problems. Fong, as well as those who didn't mistreat Lu's sister Rui all these years, had bigger and bigger businesses and got to know more and more people, including little princes, princesses and even the emperor. Inexplicably, he climbed to the position of county lieutenant, and countless people had to salute him respectfully and call him county lieutenant. This was too different from Li Yi's original ideal. It should be known that he just wanted to make some money to live in retirement here. However, ideals would change with time. If he stayed in Willow Leaf Village like this for the rest of his life, he would probably die of boredom soon. Even if he wanted to live in retirement, he had to change a place. After a period of time, when he had enough money, he would buy a house in the prefectural city and bring Rui and the others there. It was not only troublesome but also tiring to run back and forth between the prefectural city and the village every day. After dinner, there was still a long time before it got dark. Li Yi walked around the yard for a while to digest the food, and he thought about how he should be lazy tomorrow. He sat in the county government office and drank tea all day, and he went to the latrine a lot. He was so bored that he was going to be moldy. A graceful figure walked past him, bringing with it a faint fragrance. Without looking up, Li Yi knew that it should be Lu Rui, who had just taken a bath after dinner. It was her favorite perfume. "Follow me," Mississippi Lu said lightly and walked out of the door. Seeing that she went to the newly built stable to get the horse, Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately showed a trace of joy on his face. Was she finally going to teach him how to ride a horse? Li Yi had been thinking about this for a long time. In just a moment he came to himself and hurriedly chased after her. In this life, including his previous life, he had only ridden a horse twice. No, it should not be said to be riding. The first time was when Fong grabbed him to lie on the horse and he fainted because of the bumpy ride. The second time was when he was still pressed on the horse by him and it was still bumpy all the way. After getting off the horse, he held the willow tree by the moat and vomited for a long time. At that time he secretly swore in his heart that he must learn how to ride a horse if he had a chance in the future. Although he might not be able to ride a horse in fine clothes and travel to the ends of the world with a sword, at least he would not be embarrassed when he encountered such a thing in the future. The horse that Zhou Xian gave him was indeed a good horse. It had a wide forehead, big and bright eyes, bright and full of expression, big and straight hooves and no messy hair on its body. Li Yi had seen in a book about horses that a horse that looked like this could be regarded as a hero among horses. Of course, the most intuitive way to distinguish it was that after Lu Rui commandeered the horse, she did not intend to return it to him. After passing through the stockade village and walking for a while, he could see a flat grassland. When Li Yi walked over, Mississippi Lu was waiting for him there with the horse. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.